Yeah, right. Good evening, folks. Welcome to the, what month is this? April. April edition of the Amherst Planning Board. We all come to seem to blend together after a while. Let me go through some housekeeping here first, and then we'll start the meeting. We'll first off ask that obviously if you get a cell phone call, that you go out there with it. And then quite honestly, we'd appreciate it if you put the phones on mute or turn them off because it kind of disturbs everybody else. In any event, the planning board, the members of our volunteers appointed by the town board, okay? We make final decisions on site plans and subdivisions. We're an advisory only on rezonings, which we have some this evening, and make recommendations to the town board. The town board, of course, are elected officials, and they receive recommendations from the planning board and make final decisions on rezonings. All right, as far as the procedures and the ground rules for tonight, the petitioner will present to the board on the agenda item. The board will ask questions and converse with the petitioner or petitioners. I will then ask if anyone, certainly on the board, or has any comment or questions, and then, of course, we will ask anybody in the audience to do the same. The planning board will ask the petitioner questions and address any questions or comments at the public. Okay, there's a laser up there that is attached to the podium to use to direct anything in the hearing. If you use the laser pointer, please refer to the large screen on the dais. Time limits. Presentation by the petitioners, 15 minutes. Comments by the neighborhood representative spokesperson. That's the first person that comes up on the item. Gets 15 minutes. Individual speakers get 3 minutes. If, for some reason, we have to evacuate this room, please don't come this way. Go out either those doors or those doors, either front or the back. Again, we ask that if you have a cell phone, please put it on mute, only because if it goes off, it kind of disrupts the folks here. Once we've gone through with your agenda item, all right, a lot of times folks like to talk a little bit about it afterwards. We only ask if you're going to do that, if you'd move far enough down the hall, because that hall things echo. There again, the sound comes in here, and the next petitioner, when they're up making their presentation, it's hard. We have a hard time hearing that. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, that would be great. All right? Having said that, would you be so kind as to start the meeting and to take roll call, please?
Shamil.
Here.
Gill.
Here.
Gilmore.
Here.
Giuliani.
Here.
Khan.
Here.
Penberthy. Here. Raphael.
Here. Thank you. We have a full board this evening. All right. And I'm going to, the first thing out of this, all right, I'm going to ask for a motion to move the unfinished item number 7, which is the Snyder mixed-use building, to item number 1 on the agenda for the consideration. So I have a motion.
I'll second.
We have a second. Motion by Dell, second by Carey. Roll call, please.
Shamil.
I abstain from voting. They're a client of my law firm.
Gill.
Yes.
Gilmore.
Yes.
Giuliani.
Yes.
Khan.
Yes.
Penberthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes. The motion passes 6 and 1 abstention. All right. I'm also going to ask for a motion to maintain the item to be adjourned because of a seeker. Seeker understanding means State Environmental Quality Review Act determination cannot be made by the planning board at this time for the following reasons. The planning department must coordinate with the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, which is referred to as SHPO, pursuant to section 617-6, B42 of the seeker regulations based on the resources evaluations report created in March 23rd, 2023. SHPO has now determined that the building at 4548 Main Street is eligible for inclusion on the state and national register as in historic places. The Town of Amherst Historic Preservation Committee which is HPC it's referred to, has received a local landmark designation application for 4548 Main Street. Accordingly, the planning board requests a determination from the HPC, requiring the designation of 4548 Main Street. The property at 22 Chateau Terrace is identified in the 2011 Recognizance Level Survey of Historic Resources for the town of Amherst as part of a potential local historic district. The HPC has received a landmark destination application for 22 Chateau Terrace. Accordingly, the planning board requests a determination from the HPC regarding the designation at 22 Chateau Terrace. I ask for a motion.
So moved.
I have to oppose that.
Excuse me? I ask for a motion.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Shamil?
Abstain for the same reason.
Gill?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Giuliani?
Yes.
Khan?
Yes.
Penberthy? Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1 abstention.
For the record, the applicant didn't consent to an adjournment, and you're past your 62 days, because you closed the public hearing. So, I'm just putting on the record that you passed your 62 days, you closed the public hearing, I consented to tonight for the meeting, and there was no consent from the applicant, the table doesn't matter.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. We just adjourned item, which was number 7, to number 1, and we've adjourned it to this time until we get clarification. So if anybody's here for that item, there's no further testimony, there's no action on it this evening.
Could you explain what you just said in the microphone?
I didn't really hear it all that clearly myself. It sounded like he was a little upset, and we'll get some, well, please, he has a right to his opinion, like we all do, all right? And all we are doing, quite honestly, in the fact that we've got to get some clarification on determination, as I said, we can't act on a seeker when we have some information that is not clear to us. So until such time as that is cleared up, and we're not certain when that will be, so I can't, and you notice I did not ask for an adjournment for next month. It's open until such time as those items have been clarified. Okay?
Could you explain the 62 days that he was referring to?
No, I'm sorry, you're asking him to do a legal.
Oh, sorry, can I ask you?
No. No, the hearing's closed, so I don't feel comfortable.
So that's it. So now, in deference to the next item, we will let these folks exit the room. There you go. See? Seatbelts weren't too bad, were they?
And there's,
You have no idea what happens my day of You're going to help move things along?
We didn't hear you.
Please forgive me for a moment. Folks, we'll want to let these folks exit the room. Come on, Mr. Police Officer, do your job. I know Buckley will be pissed. Talk to Eric. That's all I care about. And Culpa was cool with it the first time. He tried calling me back, and I tried calling him back, and his voicemail box was full. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, that's Mike. Mike.
okay, Mr. Chairman, if I may, this room echoes, and I notice that when anybody just whispers, comes up here and it interferes at least with my ability to hear things. So if everybody could just keep it quiet, and if you have to talk, please leave the room.
What?
Okay, sorry.
Just a little levity, just a little. I said, no, you didn't hear me. I said, what?
I got it.
All right. Item number 1. All right, the request, site plan review, SP 2022. Proposed Phillips Brothers, Shatkin School of Dentistry, and parking expansion. Property located at 2525 Kensington Avenue. The floor is yours.
My name is Joseph Molick. I'm with Stigler Snyder Architecture. I also have with me Mike Brogan, who's Executive Vice President over at Damon University. We have Dr. Todd Shatkin with us, who's going to be the tenant for the dental school. Phil Snyder from Stigler Snyder, and then we have Mike and Pat Phillips from the Phillips Brother, the owners of 2525 Kensington. We're here today just to go through 2525 Kensington. The site itself is located at the northeast or southeast corner of Bentham and Kensington Avenue. We have Main Street to the north. We got the 90 to the east. Site itself is zoned for general business. Currently, the building is occupied by the Phillips Brothers. Dr. Todd Shatkin and Damon University will be occupying the other portion. The existing building is a one-story commercial building with parking facing currently on the west side of the building and the south side. The north side is a shared drive with the neighboring property to the north. Within this proposal, we will be working. We've been working with the town and the county on using Ridgewood Drive as a parking to accommodate our parking for the property. The property itself doesn't have enough parking spaces, so we've been working with the town on that. The existing building is about 29,000 square feet. The dental school or dental college will be about 1,600 square feet. We're introducing a mezzanine on the second floor, which will be about 4,000 square feet. As I mentioned before, there'll be improvements on Ridgewood Drive to accommodate adequate parking for the site. We do have some approvals for use of that Ridgewood Drive. Some of the features on the site, you'll see the northwest corner, we have the transformer. Currently, there's actually dumpsters there, so we're going to kind of reconfigure that, put the transformer there. We'll dress it up, hide the transformer with grass and trees and whatnot. To the south, the dumpsters will be located at the south of the building. Again, you can see at the bottom, the southeast corner, you'll see there's a lot of shrubbery, trees and shrubs that we'll plant to kind of hide the parking plus the garbage enclosure. Along the west side of the site, the parking will remain as is. And then you can see to the east Ridgewood Drive where we're acquiring that for public parking. Just some renderings of the renovation work. So obviously we're going to upgrade the front of the building along Kensington. Introducing some snow material at the belt line of the building. There's an Achia product. You can see it almost has that wood grain look, just to kind of add the warmth to the building, and then some green canopy just to provide some covering and location for signage. At the back of the building, you're kind of carrying the same materials to the back side. Currently, the back side of the building is pretty unused, unfinished, so we're dressing that up with, again, stone materials along the belt line. Some cement board and a chia product, which is a wood grain look. Above that for warmth again, and then you'll see introducing a canopy where students and staff will be entering the building, and that will have Damon College School of Dentistry on there.
Okay,
That's it.
thank you. Questions, Brittany?
I didn't understand, was this also like a clinic for the public to perhaps go to, or is it just strictly students at the school?
So students will be coming here from the Damien University. They'll actually be shuttled in. They'll be doing some lessons here, and they'll practice real work on patients. So patients will be coming in. Anyone from the public, right, Dr. Shakin? They'll come off the public. They'll be regulars with these students, but they will arrive on site and have work done. So internally, we have about 42 treatment stations to accommodate that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
at any given time, there would be 42 patients being worked on at the
Not that many. Probably about 20 patients at most. But there's gonna be two years there. So the second year students and the third years, and they're gonna take their terms using the. Yeah, maybe Todd would probably explain it a little bit better.
Sure. Come on up, just name and address, please.
I'm Dr. Todd Shatkin, office address at 2500 Kensington Avenue. Did you want my home address or just? Okay. So maybe, Ms. Penberthy, maybe I can answer your question a little bit more clearly. The plan is to, and Mike Brogan is the Vice President and Provost of Damon University and Executive Vice President. We've been working on this project now for nearly 3 years, and we are very excited that this is moving forward. The school will have 40 students per year. It's a 3-year program. So ultimately, at the 3-year mark, we'll have 120 students. But the first two years are mostly training years, and then toward the second half of the second year and the third year, the students work in the clinic. The clinic will be located in this facility. The clinic will be open to the public, and dental schools in general offer discounted dentistry rates to the public, so the prices will be approximately half the cost of what you or your family might pay at a general dentist's office or a family dental office, so the prices will be less. And we have anticipated 40 to 50 dental chairs in the clinic, and we will expect to have the students pair up, so the second and third year students will be paired in one operatory, and they will share the treatment of patients. So in other words, one student will be working and one student will be assisting, and vice versa. And as mentioned previously, there'll probably be approximately 20 to 30 patients at any given time. We don't anticipate every single chair being used at the entire time. Some of the chairs will be used for practice, for working on mannequins, for continuing their practice, and also they actually work on each other, the students, to learn. They give injections, they do small fillings on each other and things like that.
So it's slightly more like a dental clinic than it is a school, because these are older students that are just doing their clinical work. Is that fair to say?
Well, no, the dental school starts after college, right? So they have to go through their undergraduate education, and many of them will be at Damon University undergrads, and then they start dental school, and the dental school is a 3-year postgraduate program for a DDS degree, a Doctor of Dental Surgery degree. So they're going to be, most of these students will at that point be probably in their mid-20s or later, as far as age, if that's what you're asking, but they're, what was your, I'm sorry, about, but.
The characterization of the building is more of a dental clinic,
Right.
slightly more than a school.
It's going to be both. It's a training clinic, and we have some classrooms built into there as well. And they're also going to be taking classes at Damon University and shuttling back and forth, and doing their preclinical dental lab work in our laboratory in our facility across the street.
And then would there just be general operational hours for the public then, those that are getting services there at the clinic, like 9 to 5 or something like that?
We're going to also have evening and weekend hours anticipated, but right now it's going to be mostly, it'll probably be like 9 until 7 or 8 p.m. So we'll have 2 shifts of students working.
Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you. Michael?
No questions.
Joe?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I'm trying to wrap my mind around numbers. Potentially, you could have 120 students at one time, true?
No, not in the clinic, no. The first year of dental school is pretty much all book work. The entire first year is book work and preclinical laboratory training, which will be done primarily at Damon University on Main Street at their headquarters of the school. So the first year students will not be in the clinic at all. So the second year students will be in the clinic half of the year, the second half of their second year, and the third year students will be in the clinic pretty much their entire year, okay?
So I'm still confused. How many students do you expect to be in class at one time?
In the clinic,
Yeah.
in the clinic, in the dental clinic at the university dental clinic, there'll be 2 years of 40 students each, so 80.
All right. How many in the school?
120 total for the 3 years.
So that, if my numbers are correct, does that say 160 is potential?
No, 120 would be the maximum.
120 will be the max.
So you'll have
Okay.
40 students per year and in 3 years, so
Okay.
the maximum will be 120.
All right, I finally got that. Now, the next question is, how many parking spaces are available today?
I'm sorry.
On the site itself?
Yes.
Oh, geez, that's, should have had that on me.
Just approximately. I mean, you don't have to be exact.
I think we have, maybe at the most 25, I think we have right on the site, and that's why we are working with the town on Ridgewood Drive too.
But also, the majority of the students will be shuttled. Almost all of them the students will be parked at Damon University. Damon has shuttle buses that shuttle the students back and forth, and that's what Mr. Brogan is here to discuss.
Yeah, I noticed he said shuttle in his opening statement. Yeah, so you think that the majority of people are going to be shuttled back and forth?
Students,
Students?
yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Students will be.
So, again, how many existing parking spaces do you have approximately?
There's approximately 25 spaces on the current site.
And how many are you adding?
We're adding up to, what was it, 60?
Approximately.
55.
much?
55?
55.
Yeah.
You're adding 55 to the 25 you have, is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, something like that.
So it's a total of about 80 spaces.
79
There's
total.
about 80 spaces total when it comes down to it, yeah.
My concern is the fact that if the shuttle works, and it will work to some degree, I'm sure, but it may not work totally, you're going to get to a point where you may have a little bit of a problem with parking. And the problem that we have with that is going to spill over onto the street. And that's going to present some problems. There's enough congestion that exists there today without adding to it, okay? I'm not saying your project is bad. I'm not saying that it isn't something that is necessary. I'm just saying I'm concerned about going forward with the number of spaces that are available and the number of people, because in the meantime, you're besides, let me finish. Can I finish? Yeah, can I finish? Because in addition to the number of students that you're going to have there, you also have a clinic there, don't you not? A normal dental practice. So you're going to have people coming and going all the time, plus you have staff. And looking at your commercials, you have pretty extensive staff, I think. Seems to be a lot of people there, which is good for you, okay? But in the meantime, I'm just concerned that it's not going to be adequate by the time you get done with all the people.
You can explain that now. You want to clarify that? Or you want to talk with them about it?
I'd like Mr. Brogan.
Sure.
I would like Dr. Brogan to address the shuttle situation, because they have shuttles that are currently in use and move all around the city.
So I'll just give you a real quick background on Damon. So Damon University, established in 1947. We're in our 75th year. We have 62 baccalaureate programs, 37 masters, and 4 clinical doctorates. We have two campuses, Amherst, and we have a campus in Brooklyn, a branch campus. So our students live in campus housing on Campus Drive, adjacent to the campus. We also have students that live at Collegiate Village. So for many years now, we've had a shuttle that have taken our students from our main campus and our housing facilities back and forth to the campus. So the Research and Information Commons is at the main campus, along with all the other academic classrooms and laboratories. So we're very, very experienced with shuttle, and we have numerous shuttles. Each shuttle seats about 24 students. We have numerous students, or numerous vans, and they continually go around a loop from Damon, Collegiate Village, Campus Drive, and so on. This would just be part of the loop. We'd come down Main Street, down to Kensington, down to Eggert, and then back to Damon. So it would be a loop.
What would the frequency be?
They run on a needs basis. We used to have a program at the Tri-Main building downtown, and we had students and we had up to 100 students at a time going back and forth to Tri-Main, back down to Damon. So,
Thank you, Doctor. I'm glad you clarified that, but let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Are you going to compel the students to use a shuttle?
pardon me?
Are you going to compel the students to use
Students
the
will be,
shuttle?
absolutely. Students typically would park at their residence on Campus Drive or Collegiate Village. We'll have some commuters and so on. But typically, they'll park at the main campus for the Research and Information Commons, which is the library and the other academic and clinical spaces. They'll then, it would be a whole lot easier for them, much more efficient, to just catch the shuttle and head down, to the dental school and then back. So,
I hope you're right.
yeah, we won't, certainly we wouldn't compel students, but my experience, I've been there 44 years, the students are going to take the most efficient means, especially if they got to catch a class, so I think they'll use it.
Again, I hope you're right.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, thank you.
Good?
Yeah.
No questions. Joseph? No questions.
No questions.
All right. Does anyone in the audience wish to speak? And I'll suggest to them with any of these hearings, folks, if you are interested, when they start to speak, if you'd line up, this expedites the process a little bit. Thank you.
Good evening. David Borden from 627 Kings Highway. First of all, I'd like to say that I think this is a great project. There are a lot of good things about it. The property currently is in really a lot of disrepair. The proposed pictures and everything make this look like a lot better of a aesthetic, if you will, for the neighborhood. There are a few issues that I wanted to address. First off, I know I've had discussions with Dr. Shatkin in the past about some of the previous projects. I did not see in the plans, and so this is a question about any kind of excavation with jackhammering. That was pretty disruptive with previous projects. Just wanted to make sure that there was not any long-scale jackhammering going on in the neighborhood that is going to be disruptive to the neighborhood. There were several months of that for the 2500 Kensington project. That was pretty disruptive all throughout the summer. So that was a question for the whether that was going to exist or not. Second of all, do you want to just state everything and
Please.
and then,
Yeah,
okay.
here's the way this is going to work, is you can ask your questions to, and you speak to us.
Okay.
All right? And then whomever follows you, and whatever their concerns are, and once we've gone through concerns from the public, we will then give the petitioner the opportunity to respond. Okay?
Right. Okay. So we were just talking about the parking. The parking was another concern. You raised, Mr. Giuliani, you raised some of the concerns similar to what I have. First off, the shuttle service sounds like a great idea. I know as an undergraduate, I utilized the shuttle service from UB South Campus, moving to get me from University Heights and University of Buffalo South Campus to North Campus all the time. As soon as I became a grad student, though, I was trying to be as efficient as possible, making sure I had my own car. I was living not near the campus or on the campus. I found my own places to live. I was a little older, had a different place to live. So students are not necessarily going to be living right at the campus and taking a shuttle right from the campus. They're going to drive from wherever they live in their own vehicle, get there with their couple of extra minutes of sleep in the morning, not have to stand in the weather waiting for a shuttle bus under a awning or whatever it is, waiting for the shuttle times to come up and make sure that they can get where they're going. They're also, when they get to the School of Dentistry, they wouldn't have a car to perhaps go out to lunch or anything like that. They're going to not have the convenience when they're using the shuttle. I think the shuttle is going to go widely unused. Now, it remains to be seen, but I know as a grad student myself with my own car, I wanted the convenience, and there's nothing compelling them to go an inefficient route with a shuttle if they actually have their own vehicle. The number of parking spots, when you're talking about the 40 students per day, 40 to 45 students per day, possibly expanding to 120 students, maybe they're not all going to be there, but expanding beyond the 40 students per day, they're going to be there. The proposal says 8 hours a day. If a good percentage of them are not taking the shuttle, they're going to fill up a lot more parking spaces. And the parking study showed that 62 parking spaces would be needed for the shared parking study if those 40 students are not taking the shuttle. They're going to take up spaces. Also, 21 patients at a time simultaneously are proposed. There isn't anything in the proposal that talks about any kind of overlap when patients are finishing up, or new patients arriving, where there'd be some overlap of patients. And I believe that's it for parking. With regard to the signal warrant analysis, it didn't indicate that there was a need for a traffic signal at the corner of Bentham Parkway and Kensington Avenue. The traffic itself is, it gets pretty substantial traffic at that point. The traffic itself might not have warranted a traffic signal. However, there was indication in the proposals that there'd be some shared building space between the School of Dentistry and the existing property at 2500 Kensington. If students and staff would be walking across Kensington, that could pose a risk to some of those students and staff walking across the street. I know there are currently, I see pretty regularly people walking across Kensington, and there's no crosswalk at that intersection or anywhere in that stretch between the dentistry buildings on either side. That is a risk right now. So if there's no three-color traffic signal proposed for that site or recommended for that site, I would definitely like to see at least a crosswalk similar to what's in front of Town Hall here, that lets people cross if they're going to cross safely if they're trying to cross. Even without the dentistry school, there's no way for people in the neighborhood to currently cross other than walking down to the corner of Main Street. And the current staff at Shadkin Dentistry, it would help their safety as well, walking between the buildings if there was a crosswalk there too. Another thing that has been mentioned is the accreditation of the dentistry school. So a lot of decisions are being made prior to what I have not heard that there was actually an accreditation designated for the dentistry school. So a lot of these decisions are being made before there's actually an accredited dentistry school. That's it for that. And I believe there are another couple of decisions to be made by the zoning and planning boards, zoning and town boards, that I believe are supposed to precede decisions by this board. So I just had a question of whether this board can actually act before those decisions are made about the giving over the right of way for the Ridgeway for use of parking.
Our action here this evening is for two things: for seeker determination and for site plan review. That's what we're here to act on tonight.
All right, so that's all I had. So thank you.
Anybody else?
Good evening, members of the planning board. Ari Goldberg from the law firm of Barclay Damon. I'm here on behalf of Grindstone LLC. That's the record property owner of 4949 Main Street. It's just to the north of this property, at the top of the image that's shown on the slide. Recently, we submitted a letter into the record of this proceeding expressing our general support for the project, but also offering a few reasonable conditions on a possible site plan approval. And I just want to echo the contents of that letter this evening. There's no doubt, based on, as you heard from the presentation of the applicant, that this is a transformational development for the neighborhood, particularly in the form of trips generated from the proposed use and the parking needs. And I don't think it was referenced by the applicant, but we really take no real issue with the SRF, Passer Associates Traffic Analysis Letter. We're happy to see the substantial improvements being made to Ridgewood Drive right away and that accommodate that new traffic. The concern really is that while Ridgewood parking would be public parking, it might just be public parking in name only. And it's clear from, I think, what you heard and the questions from Mr. Giuliani, as well as those of the gentleman on Kings Highway, that the proposed use could very easily monopolize the entirety of the supposed public parking on Ridgewood. Currently, Grindstone leases 1/3 of its 9,000 plus square foot building to a bustling dermatology practice, and we're always evaluating further build out or additional tenants. Even now, from that one single tenant renting 1/3 of our building, overflow parking is relegated to the existing parallel parking on Ridgewood. And the improvements really will make that area more accommodating, more accessible, an overall better overflow parking area. But it can only be that transformational, that beneficial parking if it truly is public. And to that end, we offer those two conditions. First, we requested that signage be included in conspicuous locations demonstrating that it is public parking. The second one is that there needs to be some sort of condition that says that the shuttle service, whether it's compulsory or not, needs to be in perpetuity for the life of the project. And that triggers an enforcement mechanism for the town, as well as an ability for neighbors like Grindstone, as well as the gentleman on Kings Highway, to communicate with the town and possibly help them understand what may or may not be happening in the public parking. As this planning board likely knows, its authority to issue conditions stems from New York State Town Law 274A4. The standard there is pretty simple. It's the conditions need to be reasonable, that are directly related and incidental to the site plan. And I think that's exactly what these two conditions are. They ensure that public parking improvements really are public, and they provide that impetus for enforcement and compliance. I think based on some of the other comments I may have mentioned, there could be even more conditions, including pedestrian access across Kensington or other considerations based on comments from the applicant as well as that of the gentleman on Kings Highway. But with that, thank you for your time and your consideration, and we do look forward to the improvements, both private and truly public, at 2525. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Please.
Didn't really think I was going to speak tonight, but I'm a resident. I live right on Kensington Avenue, and
Name?
Linda Prout,
And your address?
2418 Kensington.
Thank you.
So I'm a couple houses down. I'm just frustrated that another project would be in that neighborhood. It's still a residential area. I don't know if any of the neighbors are really aware of what's going on. I did not receive a letter. A friend of mine told me what was happening, and that's why I came tonight. And I'm just frustrated that something like this, I mean, it sounds like it could be a wonderful thing, but why there? The location just seems out of place to me. And all the concerns people have mentioned about parking, traffic, whether they're shuttled or not, now you're going to have the shuttles on the street. The traffic and the speed is very heavy right now. And I kind of get that we want improvements, but I just don't think this is the location. I don't see how it's going to work. And once it's done, it's done. You know, so that's about all I really have to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, the floor is yours to respond to those questions and what you'd like to do about it.
I'll do my best to try to respond to Mr. Borden first. I understand his concerns. And number one, the accreditation process is well underway. We've got the initial thumbs up from the Commission on Dental Accreditation. We got a letter from them. They've moved on to the next stage, which is a site visit, which is scheduled in September. The site visit is really to come out to Damon University to interview the faculty, to discuss the project. They don't have to see a finished project, but they need to see the plans and what's in the works and the curriculum and all of that. And that's set up for first part of September, which is a huge step forward. After that, we should be receiving final initial accreditation from both CODA and the New York State. So I don't think we're premature at all, because there's a lot of work to be done on this project, and we're not going to put any kind of shovel in the ground or construction until we get to that point where we get the accreditation, because this is a very expensive project, as you can imagine. There will be no blasting or digging or construction in the ground per se. It's all going to be really doing a facelift on the building. It's going to be external and internal facelifts. It's going to, pardon the expression, as my brother being a plastic surgeon, he might like the word facelift, but we're going to make the place look really beautiful, just like we did on our building across the street, and it will only enhance the neighborhood aesthetically. So there will be no digging, and I understand that was a long process, trust me, for me as well. It took us much longer to dig our foundation for the 2500 Kensington building than we expected, but that will not be happening whatsoever here.
Dr. Shakin, could I ask that you respond to us, only because
Yes.
if they don't, we
Yes.
can't get the recording right.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
So there will be no in-the-ground construction. It's going to be all on the exterior and interior of the building. So there will be no noise that they have to contend with. Okay, I think there was one other thought. Okay, as far as the shuttle goes, I believe that we will definitely utilize the shuttles and compel the students to do so. And in addition, we also have an additional shuttle at Shatkin Dental Health that can also be used, that holds 17 seats. So we can also, besides the 3 or 4 that Damon has that hold, what is it, 30 in each bus? More, 24 per bus, so maybe you have 5 or 6 rotating, and we have an additional one. So we will have shuttles going and dropping people off, and they will be pulled up to the back door. They're not going to be sitting on Kensington and blocking traffic or anything like that.
Question. So I realize there's a lot of facilitating to determine here yet, all right?
Yeah.
And your schedule and so forth. So in this process, if it suddenly you found that parking did become an issue, all right, is there a way that you could adjust some of the volumes of students or patients or anything any particular time? I mean, I realize from a revenue perspective that impacts that a little bit, but, you know, as opposed to saying, well, all right, we thought we could handle 40, we're finding we can't, so we cut back a little bit so that parking doesn't become an issue. Are those
Right.
things options to look at?
Right, well, one of the biggest things that we're looking at with Damon and with the new dean of the dental school, who, by the way, was trying to be here, but he didn't make it. He's from Boston, but he and I and Mike have been speaking regularly about the idea of different shifts. So we will have evening hours, so that we may have a class from 8 until 3 o'clock, where there's a clinic is open, then from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock, and then from 6 o'clock to 8 or 9 o'clock. So that's why I said there's not going to be all the students working at the same time and all the patients there at the same time. And patients also will appreciate evening hours because they may work during the day.
And then if you could figure that out, that would maybe answer some of those unknown
Yeah.
things with regards to people are doing some quick math. Now all of a sudden that doesn't become an issue anymore.
Yeah, well, we are definitely planning to adapt to the need and make that happen if we need to. And if you feel like you need us to put that on paper for you, we can do that.
I think it might satisfy some of their concerns.
Sure.
I know no one asked this, and it probably sounds bizarre, but is there going to be any kind of a weekend issue of anything with this, or is it Monday through Friday?
We may have Saturday hours at some times too. The other thing that came up was the location. Well, this is actually an ideal location for a dental school, better than probably any other place in Western New York. You've got the 290 Main Street, where patients can come from all over Erie County and access the care needed there very conveniently. And it's also on the bus line from the city of Buffalo. And so it's really a perfect location for access of care, from an access of care standpoint.
It's directly across the street from your current operations.
Correct.
I get it. Okay.
I don't know if I addressed all the questions, but
Can we,
okay.
can we address Mr. Goldberg's proposals?
Just kind of going back, even, just starting off with the blasting, obviously us as architects, we know what's going to happen here. There's going to be internal work. There might be some demolition of floor slab there just to get all the plumbing, electrical work in the floor slab, but that's all going to occur on the north side. So sound shouldn't be traveling to the residential neighborhood. Along with the parking is, nothing's going down deeper than it is. Everything's going to be kind of dug out where it is, and new base will be put in place. And actually, most of that grading will be built up to accommodate wheelchair accessibility to that back entrance. Right now, there's about 20-inch drop between the floor slab and grade, so we have to build all that up. So there'll never be any blasting happening. Signal warrant study was mentioned. Again, our study did clarify that we did not need to put in a crosswalk. We were a little shocked with that. There used to be a crosswalk there at one point. It looked like it was removed several years back, maybe within the last 5 years. That's something if as further investigated, we could implement. But again, from that signal warrant study, there was nothing putting in a new crosswalk in place. It would help us. It would help us. We could do that. We can look further into that one. Zoning approvals, we already went through zoning approvals, and also the town board approvals, so I think that was commented on earlier. Parking by Grindstone, again, obviously there's the Grindstone's property to the north of us. They do have their fair share of parking on their lots. I know they're not using all of it. We are aware that not fully occupied. We are considering Ridgewood Drive as a public use. Anyone can use that. Again, I think with our parking study, the big thing was just ensuring students are shuttled to alleviate the overflow.
Is there an objection to the Ridgewood parking being marked as public as was requested?
Sorry, objection from?
Ye-
No, we don't have an objection
Would
to
there be
that.
an objection to the parking lot being marked as a public lot? So that if I pull into it, I know it's a public lot, that's what was requested.
Yeah, there's no objection to that.
Okay.
Is shuttling in perpetuity, that's something we can kind of implement into our language for our letter from Damon University. And again, just one last thing, just in terms of development, concerns about development here. Obviously, this is considered general business zoning. We're not changing that by any means. We are improving the property. I think it'd be nice for the neighborhood to have a little bit more vegetation on this property. Most of it's currently asphalted and whatnot, concrete. So we are removing some of that and kind of dressing it up. So I think this is going to be more of a positive for the neighborhood. Also, the back alley of Ridgewood Drive is currently, fairly unused. A little sketchy in one sense. So I think as us dressing this up, it will kind of just make it more of a safer space to say.
Okay.
I would just add, those of you who may have followed our project at 2500 Kensington, we spared no expense to make it a beautiful facility, and we will do the same here. We anticipate spending $6 to $7 million on this project.
Thank you. I think we've answered all the questions. I would certainly like to close this hearing. Is it okay if we do that? All right, hearing's closed. I don't think I'm always going to do that, okay? All right, next item number 2.
Good evening, Chris Wood with Carmine Wood Design. We're the engineers for the project. Also with me tonight is Joe Manzella. He's the owner of the building, and he's also a tenant. Oh, you want to wait? Okay.
Thank you for your patience for a moment. Seem to have an abundance of activity outside this room tonight.
Good?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Okay. I'll start over. Chris Wood with Carmine Wood Design. We're the engineers for the project. Also with me is Joe Manzella. He's the owner of the building and the property and also the tenant in the building. And Kevin Curry with C4. He's the construction manager for the project. What we're proposing is a 10,525 square foot warehouse addition to the existing building on the 2.2 acre site. It's zoned RD, so it's an allowed use, obviously. We are proposing some additional parking spaces. I believe it's 8, which will bring us up to 23 parking spaces, which are required by code. One of the requests from the fire inspector was that we add a private fire hydrant, which we revised the plans to show that we are going to put the private fire hydrant in there to be able to have coverage around the entire new building addition. We are adding a new dumpster enclosure. Currently, there is not one on the site. That would be an improvement. Stormwater detention area for the increased impervious area. And where we're abutting the residential area in the back, we are adding a row of pine trees that are on top of the berm that's existing in the back. If anybody has any questions, I can certainly answer them.
Michael?
No questions from
Del?
No questions. No questions. No questions.
No questions.
In the audience?
Oh, I'm sorry, Chairman.
Yes.
With regards to the sidewalk waiver, why was the reason that that was being required by the applicant?
Being requested. So there's no existing sidewalks in the area, so we'd be connecting to, nothing on each side.
It is my understanding, though, the parcel to the left of the property, obviously a good majority of that area is not yet developed. Is there any opposition from the applicant that should that require, or should that be developed, that sidewalks would be imposed later?
That's fine. You mean on the west side?
The west, yes.
Oh, the east side? The east side is all mainly wetland, so I'm not sure that would be developed, but
Should it be, though, in the future?
if it is, yes, that's fine.
That was the only question I had.
Okay.
So we have no questions from here. It doesn't appear like we have any questions from out there. So, I'll ask again, anybody out there wish to speak on this? Question it. See nothing? I'd certainly like to close this hearing.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Next item, item number 3. Request to rezone 0.17 acres of land for OB to MFR-5, property located at 2350 Sweet Home Road. Mr. Hopkins.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Gilmore and members of the Planning Board. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Essex Homes of West New York, Inc. Also with me is Kevin Curry. So as you discussed briefly during the work session, we have 2 applications that are in front of you this evening. A request to rezone approximately 0.17 acres from OB to MFR5, and then a second request seeking relief of zoning conditions. These both obviously relate to the same project, so I just want to make it clear. There's a little bit of overlap, but I'll do my best to make it concise. The project site itself, which you can see here, of course I'm not going to, currently predominantly zoned MFR4, MFR5, and then you can see there's this OB strip here. The northern portion of the project site, including some permanent open space, is also zoned OB. There is a wide assortment of existing zoning classifications in that immediate vicinity. Next slide. There's an aerial photograph. The most important aspect of this particular aerial photograph is, number 1, the site is slightly less than 12 acres in size. Number 2, there's a large amount of permanent open space on the northern portion of the site, some permanent open space on the southern portion of the site. And literally, my client is actually the third party involved with the development of this site. It was originally rezoned to OB by Roy Jordan of North Forest Office Providers. In connection with what he then envisioned was a future phase of the project, That site has been cleared for about 10 years, as many of you recall. Second applicant that was involved was Rob Savarino of RAS Development. He sought and obtained the approvals for the current project. Once the project had been entirely approved by the Town Board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, and finally this board, it was purchased by Essex Homes. So there is a lengthy history in connection with this proposed site. Next slide. Project description, I'm actually going to, you can skip that, I'll get it on the next slide. I think you can skip that, I may come back to it. Next slide. So these are my slides. You can see the aerial photograph again of the project site. It is important to note that we acknowledge, and we've had lengthy discussions, or at least I have over the course of now nearly half a dozen years, with 4 contiguous property owners to the south, located at 560, 566, 574, and 620 North Ellicott Creek Road. Those are single-family homes. Those purple areas that are highlighted are meant to denote the approximate location of the homes on those parcels. And you can see there's some vegetation on the southern portion of our site, as well as some vegetation on the northern portion of those homes. It's also important to note that there was split zoning in place originally. 2350 Sweet Home Road, which was the Roy Jordan parcel, was originally zoned OB. When we started down the review process for that project, Average Joe's, which was the bar located on the corner, that was zone GB, coincidentally became available for sale. So as you recall, we went all the way back to the beginning, started the review process, and ultimately included that as well, which we thought was, number one, good for the development, right, not being next to an older bar, and 2, hopefully viewed as being good for the neighbors. Next slide. So ultimately on March 19th of 2018, the town board did several things. Number one, it rezoned 2350 Sweet Home Road from OB to MFR5. 2, it rezoned 2360 Sweet Home Road, Average Joe's, from GB to OB. And in connection with both those decisions, there was a set of zoning conditions that were imposed that did result in a lot of discussions and review, including input from the neighbors, as well as input from this board and the town board. Next slide. Do want to note just very briefly that if you look at this vicinity, obviously this is Sweet Home Road, you have the 990. There's a wide assortment of zoning classifications and land uses in this immediate vicinity, including OB, MFR5, RD, SA, NCD, ND, NCD, GC, and it does include some existing multifamily uses located at 2217, 2365. So it's clear as day, there is no predominant land use or zoning classification in that immediate vicinity. Next slide. So this is the site plan, and I'm going to go over it in detail in terms of why we're here this evening. I want to reiterate again, Essex Homes of West New York was not the original developer. They purchased this as an approved project. I mentioned the fact that the site consists of slightly less than 12 acres. In the end, what was approved there, we view as being very low density. It was 48 attached units, upscale, for sale. They do include attached garages. 14 different buildings, including 2 units, 3 units, and 4 units. The overall density is literally 4 units per acre. By way of comparison, R3 zoning allows 3.5 units per acre. Back at the time when Essex purchased this site, we were envisioning an entry point in terms of purchase price of about $350,000. Believe it or not, that has now risen to $500,000 as a result of COVID-19, increases in construction costs, increase in labor costs, as well as the need for some additional space because of some changes that resulted from COVID-19, which I'll talk about in a second. And then finally, I do want to note, we are proposing a 6-foot fence, which I'll show you in a second, along the western edge, the southern edge of the project site, and that's part of the original approval. Next slide. Just want to show you quickly, many of you may have been by there, that's an example of one of the 3-unit homes. And those, again, are residential units for sale. Next slide. It's an example of one of the interior kitchens. I mean, I think anyone that visits this site, walks into one of these units or looks from the outside, will see it. It is consistent with the reputation of Essex Homes of West New York, developed over the past 3 decades to really make sure they deliver a high-end, high-quality, architecturally pleasing project that will hold value over time. Next slide. That's simply to note this request, the requested rezoning, is literally limited to 0.17 acres of this nearly 11-acre site. This is a line that's located along the southern portion, and that's not to scale. We're extending the zoning boundary of MFR 5 to OB by 8 feet. It somewhat varies along the western portion of the project site, but at its narrowest point, it's slightly less than 5 feet. So a very, very minor change in terms of the actual zoning classification of the project site. Next slide. So why are we doing this? Why are we back here in connection with this rezoning? There's one reason and one reason only, and it literally is driven largely by changes that are completely outside our control. And that changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The way people work and live has changed. What we're finding is almost across the board, people that are interested in spending $500,000 want there to be a first floor, single-story sunroom. The primary use that we're finding people need that for is a dedicated office. Because while some people have returned back to work, we're now dealing with that hybrid work lifestyle where some people may commute 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 4 days a week. So we're just finding that there is just tremendous demand for that. Did we envision that way back when RAS Development proposed this project? Absolutely not, and that was prior to COVID-19. It is important to note that that sunroom is small in size. Literally limited to 12 feet by 14 feet. It extends 7 feet beyond the existing zoning line. And we really do believe this is necessary to adequately market these units and move these units in a reasonable time frame. Next slide. That's just to show the fencing highlighted in blue along the west, the southern portion, and then the eastern portion of 620 North Ellicott. It is also important to note that we have this small area of permanent open space, approximately 0.47 acres, that we agreed to. We're not proposing to touch that whatsoever. Why we think the fencing is important is if you think about it, a single-story sunroom located behind a fence. So in terms of visibility, in terms of looking into people's backyards, we really think that mitigates that concern. The sunroom will replace literally where there was windows already designed on the backs of these units. Next slide. So we have 3 options now in terms of the back of the residential units, if approved ultimately by the town board. Number 1, what we always envisioned, which is an at-grade patio, exact same dimensions of the proposed sunroom. Number 2, heading to the right, a covered porch. You can see that's not enclosed. There's a door with a small covered porch. And then number 3, with basically the exact same shape and format, a sunroom with a patio on the side. And I want to make sure, patio on the side. We are not proposing patios on the rear of these units that would extend any closer to the residential neighborhoods. If someone wanted a patio and a sunroom, the patio would be accessible off the side or the back unit, but want to not extend any further to the contiguous property owners to the south. Next slide. So we do want to thank the neighbors on this project, have met with us again and again going back in time, and while Essex Homes of West New York was not always involved, they have been involved more recently. We were fortunate enough to hold informational meetings with some of the nearby property owners, both on January 19th and April 13th. Some of them are here this evening and will also have the opportunity to comment. Mr. Curry is also engaged with numerous conversations, email communications, on-site meetings with individual property owners. So going back to the informational meetings we had on January 19th and April 13th, and I believe I've summarized the topics we discussed. The topics that we discussed were as follows. Of course, the optional single-story sunrooms on the back of the units. 2, we discussed the possibility of changing the color of the fence. The zoning condition that was imposed by the town board originally said it must be non-white. That was at the request of the neighbors. We were told clearly and unequivocally they wanted that condition to remain, so we're no longer seeking that change. 3rd, windows on the rear of the 2nd-story loft space. That will be part of the second hearing. I do want to note that the input we received immediately in connection with that request was some opposition to it, and primarily, I believe, not allowing that on the perimeter units, which are the units along the western edge and the southern edge of the buildings, which counts for 5 units, which I'll show you in a second. Next was emergency access gate installation. That is required not only pursuant to the zoning conditions, but the approved site plan. While obviously this project is still under construction, the emergency access gate has been installed, and we've actually upgraded it with some decorative paneling that will be installed in the near future. Drainage, we've made very substantial drainage improvements that would not have been required till a future phase, including an extra 600 linear feet of drainage to remove some neighbor-generated standing water. So again, an attempt to be proactive. It's important to note that we did that in terms of the drainage improvements beyond what's required per the approved drainage plan almost immediately after that meeting on January 19th. Kevin began that discussion and also worked closely with the town's plumbing division. Next slide. One of the topics that came up that I think created a little bit of an issue between the parties here, which we're hoping we can rectify and we're making an effort to rectify, was the fact that one of the units, a building permit was issued based on plans provided by the applicant with a window on the rear of a second-story loft space, something that's not allowed by the current zoning conditions. That permit was issued on September 19th of 2022. That has been framed in. It's important to note this plan showing that as being framed in has been submitted, stamped and submitted to the building department. So we do have to apologize to everyone involved that a mistake was made. While it's somewhat unfortunate that the building department did not catch it, we've done our best to rectify that concerns quickly as we can. Next slide. So what are we proposing in terms of the second request? The first request, single-story rear sunrooms behind a fence. The second request is windows on the rear side of the second-story loft space, but only on very select units. And this is illustrated here. So I want to make clear, all of the red buildings, which include the perimeter buildings, there will, yes.
You're confusing some folks here.
Okay.
So we might stay with item 3 and then.
Okay, do you want me to come to that next? Meaning go to the zoning conditions after this hearing?
Let's refer to 3 and then we'll go to 4 separately so it's easy to understand.
Okay, so Tom, if you can keep going. I do want to note this does show the drainage improvements that have been made. Again, extending beyond what was originally required, located here. And also the fact that we are implementing a stormwater management system that complies with the DEC's stringent stormwater quality and quantity standards. Next slide. And then finally, I think we can all agree this will not result in any potentially significant adverse environmental impacts. With that being said, we have submitted documentation addressing the environmental impacts. And then finally, what we are going to ask you to do this evening is issue a favorable recommendation on the rezoning to the town board. We welcome the opportunity to address any questions, and we'll be back in a few minutes presenting the request for relief from zoning conditions. Thank you.
Mr. Hopkins, any questions?
Just very briefly, the parcel of some single-family parcels, is there any discussion with or any request of those parcel owners to screen the fence? I know you discussed that they're requesting it be obviously non-white, but any like natural screening of that fence?
I think what I'm going to do, just because I know they're here, Brittany, I'm going to let them speak and then we'll respond. I just don't want to put words in people's mouths that are here.
That's all I have.
Michael?
Nothing from me.
No questions.
Harm?
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
I understand, and I say understand because I wasn't on the board at the time, that when the previous zoning was done, rezoning, it was the result of significant discussions and negotiation.
Absolutely.
And that resulted in a 30-foot setback, was it?
35-foot principal setback, 30-foot maximum building height.
I'm talking about setback here now, 35 foot. So it seems that now we are sort of expanding that envelope and going another 5 feet on one side and 8 feet on the other.
Correct.
Now, you mentioned that you have met with neighbors. What is your impression of the neighbors' feedback regarding this?
Well, again, I'm going to let the neighbors speak for themselves, but I do want to note clearly for the record, and it only became clear to Kevin and I as a result of those discussions, there was a little bit of a trust issue, primarily resulting from the fact that all of a sudden there was a unit out there with the window on the rear side of the second-story loft space. Again, the town issued a building department. We acknowledge a mistake was made, but it is important to keep in mind that Essex Homes of West New York, they have a great reputation, and they weren't the original developer. That doesn't mean mea culpa, nothing matters, but there was a little bit of a trust issue, but we're working diligently and will continue to work diligently to do the best we can with respect to that.
Well, I asked you about your impression of the meetings. You said you had meetings on January and April.
Yeah, so my impression, and again, we've met with these neighbors predating Essex's involvement. The neighbors have always been very forthright and candid. I have nothing but compliments for the neighbors.
You all set?
Thank you.
Joseph? No further questions. Thank you.
No questions.
Anybody in the audience, please line up. Name and address.
Laura Stone. I reside at 550 North Ellicott Creek Road.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could you repeat that one more time?
Sure. Is it
Your name and address.
Laura Stone, 550 North Ellicott Creek Road?
Thank you.
I reside there with my parents, Joan and Christopher. Our property is located along the entire western side of this project. Unfortunately, due to a conflict, they are not able to be here tonight, but I'm going to represent them as well as voice my own concerns. So, from 2016 to 2018, there have been extensive negotiations between the neighbors and the developer regarding this entire project. The developer has made many changes in order to satisfy our concerns, and the neighbors made many concessions during these negotiations as well. On March 19th, 2018, the town board unanimously adopted resolutions with the full support of the neighbors. There are 14 declarations filed at the Erie County Clerk's office as a result of these negotiations. As we see the project moving forward, we appreciate what we have fought for. We have started experiencing severe flooding. We went to the town and it was addressed because we have that declaration in place. One of these declarations states that these homes are to be sold and not leased. Unfortunately, we have seen that these homes are in fact being leased and not sold. This raises concerns amongst the neighbors as we are not sure how this is being allowed to happen. We recently received a letter stating that the developer wants to change zoning, changes zoning from OB to MFR-5 and to amend some of the declarations that we currently have in place. The developer is looking to get the zoning changed in order to add foundations for sunrooms, which then brings these buildings closer to the property line. This would minimize the setback from the original agreed 35 feet to 22 to 25 feet. If the rezoning is allowed, our opinion states that there would not be anything stopping the developer from moving the entire buildings closer to the property lines. Because of the size of the buildings, this would not be desirable for neighbors, and we would like a no vote to this change. They're looking to amend a declaration of restrictions, which currently restricts windows on the rear of the buildings on the second floor. This is one of the most important declarations that we fought for. Again, because of the size of these buildings, and especially if they move closer to the property line, this would be an invasion of privacy. We would like a no vote on this as well. Sacrifices have been made on the side of the neighbors as well as the developers. We have fought hard for years, and we are not in favor of any changes that are being brought to the planning board at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is William Hine, and I live at 506 North Ellicott Creek Road, pretty close to the project. So just in theory, I'm opposed to the changes, really just based on principle, and for the requested changes that they're asking. Mr. Hopkins mentioned a trust issue, and I mean, that certainly has been a problem. Sean's always been very forthcoming, and we've always been very forthcoming with him as well. But we spent several years ago hours and hours and hours and days negotiating these restrictions that met with the neighbors' approval. We've spent a lot of time on it, and it's really frustrating just to have to be back here again talking about something that we had agreed to, that we assumed was binding at the time. We did notice that there were windows in the rear of the building. We came down, came down and talked to the building department. They then put a stop to it. I know that I believe it's been framed in, Sean said, but it's ready to be, the dormers are still there, everything's ready for it to go if you do happen to approve this. The Stones, as whose daughter just spoke,
The similar, there's water issues because of the project. I believe they're trying to address it now. It affects my other neighbors more. I'll let them address that a little bit more specifically. And then she's right as well that one of the restrictions is that properties are to be sold. What happens once they're sold? You can't restrict that, but the Essex is actually renting and leasing for sure. We find the properties listed on websites, apartmentfinder.com, et cetera. So for those reasons, I just don't want to have to be coming back to these town board meetings all the time, and planning board meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Jim Bartley, 574 North Ellicott Creek Road. Yeah, there's been a lot of bumps in the road. You know, they talk about the stuff that they've done to make us happy, but those are clear violations that we had to go down to the building department or the plumbing department to get handled, okay? We brought it to their attention, and all we got out of them was, we'll have to look into this. It's been 5 years now where our backyards have been flooded, okay? And the plumbing department couldn't believe it, and so they gave them 30 days to fix this. There was a French drain that was in the drawing. They showed me the drawing. They knew it was in the drawing the whole time. Essex has been building homes for 30 or 40 years, okay? They knew when they put those dormers up and they put those windows in, they knew they were illegal. That wasn't an oversight. They're not that stupid, I'm telling you. They've been building for a long time. They're trying to see what they can get away with. Now, if you approve the zoning and you infringe on that deed restricted area, which is a buffer zone between our properties, there's nothing stopping them to build it up 2 stories, you know? There's nothing stopping them. Once it's approved, it's approved. They can do whatever they want within that zoning. So we're against the windows, we're against the zoning, we're for privacy. We gave up a lot already, 4 or 5 years ago, and we don't feel like we should have to do anymore. It's as simple as that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name's John Blitzstein. I'm at 540 North Ellicott Creek. So I'm not actually one of the adjacent lots, but I am very, very close and neighbors with the Stones who previously were represented. I do have a business that's in architecture and building for a living. I can't even imagine accidentally building a window. How many have had a window installed somewhere? It requires framing, it requires forethought, planning, and then the materials, the window itself. So for this to have happened on one building, it has to be on the cookie cutter drawings that are being used for other properties as well. So this wasn't an accident. It can't be. It's too much cost. And to do that, they're looking for, asking for forgiveness, not asking for permission, or begging for forgiveness, not asking for permission. Happens all the time. You bury boxes in ceilings so that you can get a permit later to open it up and put a light in. You put footings and infrastructure in for a fence that you're going to get approval later. That's what's happening, but unfortunately what they're stepping on are the neighbors around it. And if it opens up and gets approval here, like our previous neighbor said, what else is it going to allow? So the COVID response with the increase in costs and things like that, that was valid 3 years ago, but we're not talking about, I believe when I moved in, I'm newer to the neighborhood, so I believe they were listing at high 2s, low 3s. I haven't seen that kind of price increase on any material since we opened up the shipping lines again, since the lead time issues have mitigated, the material shortages have mitigated. Lumber costs have gone down, not up. Copper and things of that nature are available. The costs are going down, not up. So at $500,000 for a 3-year delay, it's a little bit, the math doesn't add up. And so if you have that kind of problem, but then you're also going to build an infrastructure for a window that's additional material cost on a square footage basis of that wall, it's not an accident. It can't be an accident. There's a line item, there's budget reviews. It's not an accident, at least internally. That's all I have to say. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. This is not really my thing, public speaking, so thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Andrew Fenster, 520 North Ellicott Creek Road. I also have a sunroom on the rear of our home, my wife and our daughters. When we bought our home in January of 2019, and in late 2018, when we first looked at the home, we sat on that sunroom and looked out at the forest and the beautiful green space, the deer, and we said, this is where we want to live. This is a beautiful backyard and wooded area behind our home. And then we learned of the development going in where Average Joe's, which for the record, I think all of us would have rather Average Joe's still be there and open. But we saw the development going in, and we said to our real estate agent, this is not for us. I don't want to have a big buy a home with beautiful backyard and have a development encroach. And that's when we learned of the conversations going on, the restrictions that were being put in place, and that gave us the comfort to buy our home. The fact that there would be the setback, the fencing, some green space, as I understood, was in the original, some landscape stuff in addition to the fence, and the lack of second-story windows. We felt, I'll see some roofs from my sunroom, but we would still have that private backyard, that wooded area, everything that we cherish, and was the reason, a large reason anyway, that we chose to live here on North Ellicott Creek Road. So I'll speak to the lack of trust in particular, as again, we bought the home under the assumption this was a closed matter, and with the fact that a number of the issues, including the drainage, the windows that's been spoke to by my neighbors, were only addressed after we mentioned them. A large trust issue. I'm really not comfortable with, any of these changes being made, especially it just feels like we'll just be back here in another year as they're trying to push us even farther still. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is George Rusk, and I was counsel of record 6 years ago when this was first, this came up for decision by the planning board, and then it was referred to the town board, and they were, as you have heard, there's quite a bit of history to this. I was asked by some of the residents to just say a few words to put some of these issues in context. So it's very clear for everyone. In June of 2017, I met with the developer to go over the concerns of the community, and all the residents at that time were concerned, as you can hear today, about the privacy issues, the wetland and the drainage issues, and just the quality of life. They have a nice area there that they wanted to preserve. Obviously, you can't stop development, but we wanted to control it. And we worked out an agreement where we agreed to withdraw opposition so long as certain things were done. And we negotiated those with the developer, which included some additional landscaping, some tree removal and planting, landscaping, as I said. Off-site drainage was going to be addressed with input from the residents. And then there was an elimination of a gate that had to be worked out. After numerous meetings with the town, various planning board and zoning board and the town board, the town board, a number of declarations were identified as required as a condition of the permits that were granted at the time, or the zoning changes that were granted at the time. And there were 14 of them, as the neighbors have just mentioned. Some of the main conditions, if you will, that were included in the declaration included no second-story windows, a landscape plan that was going to have the input of all the neighbors. And just to go, I'll address each of these issues separately. The second-story windows were a privacy concern at the time, and what was agreed to is that there wouldn't be any. Now what they're asking for is on the rear of the buildings to lift that condition. As you could hear, there's opposition to that. The landscape plan that had been agreed to is requiring input from the community, never got any input from the community, and we're still waiting for that to happen. A landscape plan was actually approved by the town without input by the neighbors, even though it was required by the declaration and the prior agreement. So that, again, it raises a trust concern because it wasn't implemented. The setback was 35 feet in the conditions, and it's now they want to change the 22 feet. Obviously, they're skeptical about that.
Thank you.
So in any case, there are a number of issues that the neighbors want addressed. If the board decides to go forward with any of these changes, we want to make sure that we have input and that we're kept apprised of all these changes and that it's actually codified in a written agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Seeing none, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Curry. I'm here. I work directly with Essex Homes. I was proud to join Essex Homes in November of this past year. At that time, it was readily apparent from our sales team that the need for sunrooms, which are really flex spaces and first floor offices, had become prevailing throughout the changes in lifestyles, as Sean talked about. It's an absolute imperative in order to move product of this type and to successfully complete the project. So that having been identified, we looked at what options were available to us. With regard to that, there was a need to, we could extend our buildings 5 feet closer to the fence. All of this is within the fenced-in area. We could move our buildings 5 feet, but a sunroom at 12 feet, you needed to move it another 7 feet. So what we're talking about is, I'm about 6 foot tall, we're talking about 1 foot more than this. That's how much farther we need to extend in order to create the sunroom opportunity that we believe and our sales have indicated are basically required for the purposes of sales. Having identified that early in November, we began working to see what options were available. We called a meeting, myself called a meeting with the neighbors, and we were pleased to meet with a number of the neighbors in January. At that meeting, we shared what our thoughts were. We knew Sean had shared with me that there was an extensive interaction over the course of years. Very important to note, most all of that interaction was prior to us. North Forest Development had started and was trying to continue with an office park. They decided to put it onto the market. A number of developers throughout the area looked at the project. RAS Development, Rob Savarino, approached it and wanted to build a 3-story apartment complex, very dense, on it. Ultimately, he, working in conjunction with the town, decided to pursue a project much more like this. Ultimately, my boss and my company that I'm proud to work for, Essex Homes, bought the project. We definitely, with respect to, and Sean will talk to this more later, it's a slide that we moved off of, but definitely with respect to the mistake with a window on a 2nd-story rear of a unit, there was never any intention, ever, to put those on the perimeter units. We'll speak more to that later. There was an oversight, and it's been corrected. There's never been any violations on the site, drainage, building, or otherwise, and if anything's been brought to our attention, we've addressed it immediately. We called the meeting with our good neighbors. That evening, before we were back to our homes, we had already spoke with our owner, Phil Nanula of Essex Homes, and explained the concerns and dropped several of our requests. We believe that the 2 remaining requests, and there are fundamentally only 2 remaining requests, we believe that they were very, very reasonable. One was 7 feet, plus a foot, 7 feet to extend sunrooms closer to within our fenced area. And the other one, you'll see the slide later, was to have the ability to put 2nd-story windows on rear-facing units internal to the site, on the interior of the site. That's in essence our request. Simply put, 7 units with rear windows and 7 feet closer to the fence that we're within. That evening when we met, we felt it was a good meeting. Again, we withdrew on a couple other things, and we thought that was pretty positive. It was brought up at that time that a drainage event was being experienced. I think it was a new drainage event. I immediately looked into it, and there was problems on the north end of our site, but extending more to the northern neighbor, which is still part of the original office park that would have continued. We immediately addressed that drainage issue with our contractors and with the town and with the plumbing department. I think that the combination of what we did on the north end to clear a problem on the north end, and then to install 600 feet, over 600 feet of drainage on the south end of the property, which never was required at this point, would have been part of the project moving forward. We've actually added more of it, but we immediately installed that in the dead of winter. I think that would be very hard to say that nobody could have been more responsive at that point, quicker and more effective. The alleviation of the water concerns has been absolutely remarkable, and we're proud to have done that. First time we had heard it. When I joined the company, there were no outstanding requests, certainly that I was aware of, that there was an ongoing problem. At the time, there were some things at the north end that needed to be cleared. We took care of it, and we installed, at great expense, in the dead of winter, 600 feet of line, and it's working really quite well. We're not saying we'd be done with that. If there's a need for more, we appreciate neighbors, and we work in a lot of communities. We're certainly willing to discuss more what we can do, and we're proud of what we've done to date. Be happy to answer any questions as well.
Please.
I have a couple of questions. Having lived in the area for, 50 years, quite familiar with the good reputation that Essex has. Many of my friends live in units built by Essex, and certainly excellent. So my question is not related to the reputation or what you might do to be responsive. Mr. Hopkins and you have both mentioned that a sunroof is needed to move the units. The bottom line is that a unit with a sunroof will bring more money in than a unit without a sunroom. So if that is the bottom line. So if this reduction in price, this delta dollars, which is because of not having a sunroom, whether it makes less business sense for Essex homes or not, is not a concern of this board. Okay? So if you're going to sell for $500,000, well, maybe you have to something do over there rather than encroach on a previously agreed zoning. That is my statement, so to speak. Would you disagree with that, or?
Well, I definitely appreciate the comment and do want to address that. By all means, from our standpoint, it's not about economics with regard to the sunroom. It's not about additional profit. I'll draw an analogy. It's similar to buying a car without air conditioning. The dealer would be happy to sell you whichever one that you would like, but you won't buy. The market would not buy without air conditioning. The market requires the sunrooms at this point. People work from their homes. People expect the ability to do that. Oftentimes, you have both husband and wife working from home, and that's the need. It's not, I just want to dispel any thoughts. It's not about us trying to drive the price up. In actuality, if we could do things to help with the inflation that we've all seen, we would be doing that. It's a market demand. It's not a profit motive on behalf of the developer.
Well, our home, many homes I know don't have sunrooms. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I don't find it a convincing argument. But that's all there is. Nothing further to add.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other comments on this? I understand. We're good with this?
Yes, sir.
All right, hearing nothing, close the hearing.
Thank you.
Next item.
Oh, someone did leave their reading glasses up here, just if someone's looking for them. Oh, they're yours, Kevin. That was a targeted announcement.
I understand. Please.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
So obviously, again, Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Essex Homes of Western New York. This is obviously related to public hearing item number 3. This is the request seeking relief of zoning conditions and declaration of restrictions imposed in accordance with the original approved zonings by the town board of 2350 and 2360 Sweet Home. Tom, I think you can skip all the way to my slides. There you go. So obviously we're back at the same site, and I want to make it clear. We're asking for the rezoning, so that was application number 1. Application number 2 is both Kevin and I indicated during the first public hearing, is limited to 2 changes of those conditions that were imposed by the town board as a result of discussions of everyone involved, including the planning board, town board, and the neighbors. And those changes that we're asking for are as follows. Single-story sunrooms and single-story covered porches on the rear side of the buildings. We'll illustrate that again in a second. One of the comments that was made in connection with hearing 1 was if you modify that request, nothing prevents us from, instead of doing a sunroom, doing a 2-story addition. The conditions as they've been drafted with the assistance of the planning department for your consideration would prohibit that. So it would be limited literally to a single-story sunroom, a single-story enclosed porch, in lieu of what could have already been a patio. I want to make that clear. You can't propose a 2-story. And then secondly, second-story windows on the rear side of only 7 inward-facing middle units. And I'll talk about that in a second. I certainly understand why some of the neighbors think, well, Essex Homes of West New York, again, being in this business, being very successful for more than 30 years, they knew what they were doing. They were deliberate trying to pull a fast one by putting windows on the rear side of the second-story loft space. I think if you really take a step back and think about that, no one would have ever thought that, number one, the town did make a mistake, obviously, in connection with the first one. I doubt that mistake would have continued to be made. And number two, everyone did know that, hey, this is a result of discussions with the neighbors. So to think that all of a sudden one day someone would have woken up and there would have been 48 units out there with windows on the rear of the second-story loft space, that was never going to occur. It really was an honest mistake. The neighbors may take the exception as to how it got made and should have been made, but it was an honest mistake made by the applicant and then validated by the building department. We've done our best to put that beyond us, but I get the trust issue. So next slide. We already talked about the 3 options in terms of the first condition that we're asking to modify. Again, patio, as already allowed, exact same setback. Covered porch, single story, exact same location as the patio is allowed today. And then finally, sunroom, single story, covered rather than an enclosed porch, exact same location as the patio that's approved today, all located behind a 6-foot fence. So again, pretty innocuous in terms of what we're proposing. Next slide. And I do want to note the dimensions of that sunroom flex space are 12 feet by 14 feet. So fairly small. That's a 168 square foot room, smaller than typical guest bedroom. Then in terms of, okay, we talked about this in terms of fencing. I just want to note again, fencing along the western boundary of the site, the southern boundary of the site, and a portion of the eastern boundary of 620 North Ellicott. That's already required, was part and parcel of the original approval, and the discussions with primarily the contiguous and nearby property owners. Next slide. This is the one that's important. It wasn't addressed in connection with the first presentation. The second reason that why we're here asking for relief of the zoning conditions. So there's 48 units here. As you can see, we have 6 buildings that I would say are along the perimeter of the residential boundaries. Again, these 3 buildings on the south, and then these 2 buildings on the west. Those are all 2-story, 4-unit buildings, so 20 units. Clear as day when we met with the neighbors in January, they said, unequivocally, that is not acceptable. Second-story rear windows on those units are not acceptable. Secondly, they said generally they're opposed to that whole idea. But based on the concern that we heard that night, we did go back to the drawing board. And why we did that was to try and really modify what we're requesting. So now all we are requesting is second-story rear windows for the loft space on 7 of the 48 units. It's important to know what units they are. They are the middle units of the interior buildings for 3, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. I will. So the red, excluded. Perimeter buildings, absolutely no second-story rear loft windows. Will not be permitted, are not permitted via the amendment to the conditions. Where we would like the ability to have second-story rear loft unit windows are as follows. Buildings number 9 and 10, here and here, only on the 2 inner or interior units of those buildings. And these face each other. So if you're here, you're looking out into building 10. If you're building 10, you're looking out into unit 9, in building 9. Buildings number 11, 10, 11 and 12 here. Same exact thing, only on the middle units of those interior buildings. And again, looking back and forth at each other. No views of the exterior. Building number 3 We're asking for a window to be located here. Doesn't allow a view of any of the residential neighbors. And then finally, building number 13, asking for the ability to install a window on the rear side of the second-story loft space here. As you can see, that does not encroach on anyone's view shed. So the neighbors made clear what their position was. We understand it, but we did make a good faith effort to modify our request and limit it to those 7 of the 48 units. Again, middle units of the interior buildings, only where there's absolutely no view shed of contiguous property owners. Next slide. So now I'm going to have to walk very briefly. Again, there's zoning conditions that were imposed in March of 2018. There's a draft modification in front of you. Ultimately, your advisor, and it would be town board decision, but I want to walk through what are we doing in terms of actually modifying the conditions. There's 4 conditions that come into play, even though there's only 2 topics. So condition number 4, again, asking for that to be modified to allow second-story rear loft space windows only in those designated buildings. I mean, it would be prohibited in buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 14. All those ones along the western perimeter, southern perimeter, and then as well as these 3 buildings as well. Second one is condition number 5, that exclusive of the single-story rear sunrooms and possible covered porches, the maximum setback shall remain as is. Or no, the maximum height shall remain as is. So there was a height condition. R3 zoning would allow 35 feet. We agreed to a height condition of 30 feet. If we go beyond the approved rear yard setback with either a covered porch or a single-story sunroom, the maximum height to the peak is 17 feet. So we can't just fill that in with a 2-story building. And I want to acknowledge that reflects input received from the planning department in terms of drafting those language of those conditions. So that's there. Next. Condition number 7, which as you can see is very lengthy, but I'm going to highlight it very quickly. Number 1, in orange is the existing required setback line of the principal portion of the buildings. I mean, we can build a patio beyond that, but that's got to be the rear side of the buildings. What we're asking is with respect to buildings 3 and 4, because this one backs up to permanent open space, building 5, we're asking to extend that so now it could go to 23 feet, which is the blue line, but limited again to a covered porch or a single-story sunroom. And then along the western edge, buildings 7 and 8, we're asking for that line to be extended from 35 feet to 26.97 feet, which is highlighted purple, but again, it can only be a single-story covered porch or a single-story sunroom. And then finally, next slide, Tom. So conditions 8 and 9. So 8 and 9 dealt with setbacks from adjoining properties for buildings number 6 and 7, which were then subsequently renumbered. We're asking for building number 6 that the required setback from the adjacent property located at 574 North Ellicott Creek Road, which is Mr. Bartley who spoke, that be 95 feet. And then with respect to building number 7, which is the adjoining property or to the west, that minimum setback be 137 feet. So with respect to those 2 property owners, obviously we still have a very large setback behind a fence with a 2-story building. It's actually lower in height than what you would be allowed in an R3 zoning district. So with all that being said, we would ask that you issue favorable recommendations, again, both on the requested rezoning of a few feet, as well as the request to modify 2 of the zoning conditions. And I do want to make it clear for the record again, I've known these neighbors for a long time. I appreciate their input. Kevin and I are more than willing to continue to engage with the property owners to discuss this project as it goes forward. Ultimately, as you know, it will require a public hearing to be held in front of the town board with notice to everyone within 600 feet. So thank you for the time. If you have any questions, either myself or Kevin would welcome the opportunity to address them.
I'll go through it again. Brittany, any questions? Michael? No questions. No questions. Barb? One question.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Where was the accidentally window constructed?
Where was the window?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin, can you point to which unit that was? if you want to say what building number.
So the two building permits were filed at the same time, one for this building, the window was installed, and one for this building, the window was not installed. It was framed for a moment by the framer who'd been instructed not to. The window was installed here, it's been removed, there's no violations, and we redesigned such that the home meets all approvals now. It was right here.
So even though there was a mistake there, you corrected it, and it's,
Corrected it, submitted
so there is
new
no
plans.
window and said, oh my God, we did it, and we're sorry. Okay, you fixed it.
Mr. Burke and plumbing and planning and all departments have been great to work with. Mr. Burke has told us over and over there's been no violations. We've worked very, very hard to ensure that to be the case.
Okay.
But again, we acknowledge a mistake was
Yeah.
made
No,
by
I
the design
get
team.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wasn't clear as to the status of that. That's all. Thank you.
And I just want to comment that as having worked with an AE firm and architect engineer firm for a long time, I can say such accidents are not impossible. Okay, thank you.
You're good?
Yeah.
No questions, thank you. Anybody else? Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Fenster. I reside at 520 North Ellicott Creek. Just two quick points that I would like to make in response to Sean's latest comments. Regarding the windows on the second story, I would like to point out that currently from my house at 520, you can see the dormers that are already in place, the ones that were accidentally installed. Now, given the time frame, we moved in about 3 years ago or so, I have a hard time feeling comfortable with the approval of interior building windows, because if they are to stop building now, until those perimeter units go in, those windows have a clear view into my backyard. I can see them from my kitchen windows. I'm not exaggerating when I say I feel the need to install blinds at this point in time if someone were to move into those units. You can see directly from my house, numerous properties away, those dormer windows that exist. Until those perimeter units go in, we will not have the privacy that they are alluding to. Secondly, and I don't mean to muddy the water here, but regarding rezoning, I get it. There's supposedly language in there that restricts the ability to build a second story on that further rezoning that they would like to take place, that additional 5 feet. My concern is that the argument is based on market changes, the need for a sunroom. What is to say that 1 year from now, when they are building those perimeter buildings, there's not additional changes that they think need to be made to account for new market changes? It's going back to the trust issue that was previously discussed. I have zero confidence that we would not come back to this room again because there would be a new market need for a second-story bedroom or some sort of addition to that newly rezoned area. So that's about all I have to add. Oh.
All right, so I'm not clear on something.
Sure.
You're telling me you're seeing these dormers. Tell me
Yes.
where. Show on your, pick the,
Yep, so my property, this view does not show, this is not my property here. I'm maybe 1 over, maybe 2 over. Based on this photo, it's hard to tell, or plan, it's hard to tell. Thank you. No, please, thank you. Keep going. There. So this is my property right here. This is my house.
okay?
I can see the windows that are currently on the units today from my kitchen.
Okay.
So until those other perimeter buildings go in, those windows have visibility. When they sell those units, which are going to be the next ones for sale, it's the next building built, those windows have have visibility to my backyard. Like my husband alluded to earlier, the whole premise of us buying this house on this street was the privacy, was this feeling of seclusion in the midst of Amherst. That was hard to come by, I promise you. It was it was an unusual find to find this house. And we were ecstatic. We purchased this home with the understanding that this was forever. We learned of the development, like my husband alluded to earlier, and then these windows started going in. I have a young daughter. I have another on the way. The last thing I want is to feel like I have to question Who can see into my home? That was a huge factor in us buying this house. And for this change to come forward, and I understand that this is currently asking for interior or windows on the second story interior buildings, but at this point in time, for the next, 2, 3, 4 years until those perimeter buildings are built, until you can sell all of those units, you can see into my backyard. You can see into my kitchen. I'm not comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Kim Bartley, I'm at 574 North Ellicott Creek. One point that I want to make is that there are 3 buildings that are already built and occupied, and none of them have back windows on the second floor. So I don't understand the point and why they had to change the layout of the buildings suddenly to accommodate for additional windows on the second floor when they don't have them on the ones that are already built.
Thank you.
When my wife and I moved up to this area, we aren't from Buffalo originally. We met up. Oh, I'm sorry, John Blitzstein, 540 North Ellicott Creek. When my wife and I moved up here, we're not originally from the Buffalo area. We met here in college. We moved away post college. We lived in New York City in Astoria right during the pandemic. We had freezer trucks, tractor trailers as the portable morgues, literally outside of my window. So I understand the need of having windows and being able to look outside. When we bought our property, we bought it almost sight unseen because of the neighbors and the neighborhood. We've been to our neighbor's house. We sat in that sunroom, spent a week there with them once when we were living in New York before the pandemic. Had that cup of coffee watching the deer at 5 o'clock in the morning. That is entirely why we bought our house. Only reason is the backyard and the neighbors. So all of this happening as it progresses, 35 to 26 feet, it sounds like it's not a lot. It's 25, 30% of the setback. That's a big encroachment when you think about it just in terms of ratios. Going from that, adding that 17-foot peak, though it would encroach 12 feet, economies of scale. Your light, your eyesight, your line of sight is still the same thing as that 30-foot roof as you're looking in perspective. So it's just continuing to encroach and getting closer and closer and closer, though it sounds like there's reductions and there are things being put in place to do so. In person, that's not actually what's going to happen. So when we saw a photo earlier of all the foliage that's over there, it's only about 2 feet, and a lot of it's been removed. And come wintertime, there is no foliage. So it's just a clean shot. A kid in that window with a slingshot would be able to hit my backyard and my dog or a paintball gun. And those are things that we're really concerned about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, please respond, and then we're good?
Thank you. Again, if you wouldn't mind, Tom, moving a few slides forward just to the Windows one. Yeah, thank you. I'll be very, very brief. Just want to summarize our request. It's 7 feet and 7 windows. The 7 windows, again, look upon each other within the buildings. And the 7 feet is behind a fenced area. And what we're asking for is to be able to build the room this far plus 1 foot longer. That's simply our request. We respect our neighbors. We feel that we're a very high integrity, high quality builder. And as soon as any concerns were expressed, each and every one has been addressed immediately, and we're more than happy to continue to engage. And we would do that regardless, as we do with all of our neighbors at all of our projects. So 7 feet, 7 feet and 7 windows, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, hearing anything else? I'd like to close the hearing. Hearing closed. Item number 5. All right, this is also a proposed purpose of rezoning request, rezoning of approximately 0.57 acres, CTR 5 mixed use district to allow development of a 3-story multifamily building containing 12 apartments, recreation, space, and parking at 3945 Wrench Road.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Gilmore and members of the Planning Board. Sean Hopkins on behalf of the applicant, Wrench Group LLC, which is Ellicott Development. We're here this evening in connection with the rezoning of a property located at 3945 Wrench Road in an area that most of you know very well. Yes?
In deference to you, thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
It's located in an area that most of you know well because of previous rezonings, including a couple I've been involved with. So this particular site is located obviously on the west side of Sweet Home Road. You can see it here. It's currently zoned R4, which I think everyone can agree is way out of place in that area. There's currently a single family home that's been rented. It is important to note it's located directly adjacent to a hotel that was developed by Ellicott Development previously, a hotel across the street. And then the original, what I believe is the original project in that area that's relatively new, is that mixed-use project in the student housing development that was completed by American Campus Communities. There's to highlight that. And you can see we have property that's zoned multifamily, student housing, we have mixed use, we have hotels, we have GB, we have R&D, we have Sweet Home Road, we have the 990, all in close proximity to the UB North campus. All we gotta do is head north, go around the curve, and then you're literally on the campus. From this property, I could walk to the campus in 6 minutes, literally be in the buildings. Next slide. We're asking to rezone 0.57 acres from R4 to CTR5. What we're proposing and will require site plan approval is this 3-story multifamily building with 12 units. Next slide. This is just a version of the concept plan. Will require site plan approval. Next slide. Just want to highlight again all the zonings in the vicinity, and again, nothing else located close by is currently zoned R4. It is important to note that back in time, and some of you remember this, from 1976 onward until well past 2000, this was entirely zoned research and development. The problem was there was no sewers. There was no sanitary sewer infrastructure, so for decades that property sit there and was way underutilized given the fact that it's directly adjacent to the UB North campus. Next slide. Next slide. It's a conceptual elevation. It is important to note one of the benefits of the two town's new mixed-use districts, including the CTR5, is it does require review and recommendation from the Design Advisory Board. Obviously, one of your members, Mr. Giuliani, sits on that board. They are very good at looking at the architecture, the appearance of sites. So we welcome the opportunity to meet with them as this project review process goes forward. That has to happen before we get site plan approval. And then finally, I do want to note, I think quite clearly, this is consistent with the comprehensive plan, figure 6A, which designates this area as appropriate for suburban centers, and then figure 6, which is the next slide, that designates this particular site as appropriate for medium residential. So what we would ask you to do is consider issuing a favorable recommendation to the town board on the requested rezoning, and I, of course, would welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Any questions? Michael? Dell? Have you been before the Design Advisory Board?
No, we have not yet, Mr. Giuliani. Typically, we don't start that process till a rezoning's approved, if it gets approved.
All right. Wow. No questions.
No questions.
Jason?
Will the structure be sprinklered? Since
Mr. Raphael, I'm not the expert on that. I will have to check. I rest assured when I come back in front of you for site plan approval, I will know the answer. I think it is. I believe it is required for the 3-story, 12-unit building.
Yeah.
I'm almost 100% sure.
Just double checking. No further questions.
No, none.
Anybody in the audience wish to ask any questions on this? Seeing none. All right. I'd certainly like to close this hearing if possible. Hearing no objection. Hearing's
Thank you.
closed. Thank you. Next item, item number 6. Holloway.
Good evening. Good evening, members of the Planning Board. My name is Marty Paloy. I'm the Amherst Town Attorney. Business office address at Town Hall, where we are right now. What's before you tonight is a zoning text amendment, and as such, having been initiated by the public hearing called by the Town Board, requires your body's recommendation to the Town Board on this local law. The text of the local law is there, but I'll go through it. If you can go to the next slide, Tom. This local law provides for codification of the exclusions to the town zoning's ordinance for the federal government, New York State, Erie County, and public school districts, which already enjoy absolute immunity to the zoning ordinance. Adding to those exclusions would be the town of Amherst for town projects on town property or town buildings. It doesn't go any further than that. This would put the town on the same level of those other governmental entities and obviate the review for town projects by entities other than the town board. The town board would be ultimately responsible for the approval of those town projects. It further provides for an exclusion from the zoning ordinance for the enumerated public utility purposes, as well as highway and transit purposes that are authorized by the federal government, New York State, Erie County Water Authority, and the town. Next slide, Tom. Projects initiated by the town will still require compliance with all state, federal, local laws, rules, and regulations. For example, seeker still has to be followed. New York State building codes and fire codes still have to be followed. Historic preservation and any other applicable law. These exclusions would not apply to telecommunication facilities as permitted by section 6.6-7 and 6-11 of the zoning ordinance, unless constructed on the town's behalf on town property to include a town governmental purpose. Upon adoption of the local law, as I mentioned earlier, the town board would become the entity for approval on projects to be developed on town property. On projects larger than 20 acres, the town board may refer those to the planning board for an advisory recommendation. It's worthy to note that many other towns, cities, villages within New York State have similar provisions in their zoning ordinances. Regionally, West Seneca, Cheektowaga, Hamburg, Colden, Concord, a few others in Erie County also have that, but throughout the state, municipalities have similar provisions. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is a town board initiated text amendment, so the town board opened its public hearing on this past Monday, April 17th. They left that hearing open in order to allow for time for the recommendations from this body, as well as the planning director and commissioner of building. The timing for this local law is important because of the large-scale projects that are going to be driven by the town, particularly Amherst Central Park with the closing of Westwood last week. And I'm here for any questions, if you have.
Chloe, did perhaps the town board, although obviously I think that they're very considerate and conscientious now, just can't guarantee the composition in the future, considering, no offense. Consider perhaps on projects in excess of maybe 10 acres, mandating, so it means shall instead of may, the planning board recommendation. Of course, only it's an advisory capacity, but at least so that it's still going before the planning board for its opinion.
It's certainly a recommendation that the planning board could make to the town board in its review.
Do you see that unreasonable as the applicant?
I don't have an opinion on whether that's reasonable or not.
That's all I had. Sorry, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, right. We'll talk later. Mike?
Yeah, I have a couple of concerns. This is quite a sudden and sweeping change that is being requested. I think you've given us some reasons why, because looking at some major projects. However, before I personally would feel comfortable by completely passing the buck on this, having had very little time to understand the language here and the exceptions and the exclusions, I would like to have some discussions with town as well as the planning staff before I'm able to go along with it at this point.
Okay, I'm certain that those discussions would be welcome.
I'm sorry?
Those discussions would be welcome, I'm certain of.
Thank you.
Joseph?
That's all. Thank you.
Carrie? Anybody in the audience?
Hi, my name is Sam Smith. I'm at Fruhoff Avenue. I have been very concerned about my own project. I've sat and listened to many other people concerned about their projects. My concern with this. I heard about this actually in the working session as of today, is part of what we're doing here from our own sectors within Amherst is advocating for our areas. So again, I agree, I don't really fully understand this, but what it sounds like is you're completely removing the checks and balance system. As you just said previously, it depends on what the administration in office wants to do, and they have sole discretion. I'm very concerned because you have so many sectors within Amherst who have general concerns, and you have a developer who's asking to push more of the envelope already on a different project. What's to say, and our own journey within trying to sort out what's going on within our neighborhood, we are struggling to get answers from the town as well. There's no playbook, there's no this is this, this is this. We're having to figure it out and piece things together ourselves. So the next group who has to go through, they have to go through the same struggles. By allowing this to pass, I'm very concerned about the lack of checks and balances, but also accountability. Throughout the whole process, we've been asking as just regular citizens, what is the accountability? What is the next step? By allowing this to pass through, my concern is you are working, and the town is supposed to be working for the people. You're removing that job of working for the people by removing a voice of the people and by having things go through all these respective boards and all these balance and checks. You're advocating, you're supposed to advocate for the people, and now it's just serving the board at the time that a project is going through and serving their agenda. That's not right. That's not how the town is supposed to go. And this is like a struggle with everything that's going on. It's just mind-boggling where we've gone through different boards, and a lot of people within different boards have said, well, our hands are tied because theoretically it's okay per the town, but we feel your pain. We empathize with you, but we can't do anything. And that's where we stand right now. So now you're creating a situation by proposing this of everyone's has no voice. So that is, I think this should, I agree, I think this should be tabled. I think this should be fully understood. But I think also it should be put to the people, and there should be a like a community meeting where it should be put out to the people and have the people informed. Because again, I went to the working session concerned about my own project, and I stayed because I find this mind-boggling that you're putting sole authority into 5 people, and you're removing the checks and balance system. So I would say keep the checks and balance system and look into this further. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Hearing none, would you like to respond?
Just address one point. This only applies to town-owned buildings and town-owned properties and not development projects of private corporations or individuals.
Okay. Well, I'll allow it, but you really normally not, but go ahead. You got to come up in front.
So it's in regards to town-owned properties, but town-owned properties eventually abut private areas and private homes and businesses, and you have the one situation where the developer is asking for more, and it also depends on, these are town-owned parcels, but it depends on who the town hires as the developer. So yes, it's not developer-owned, but there's no, who is the town going to answer to in those situations? Because the town's going to hire a developer to develop whatever your land is.
Thank you. Okay, that's it.
Just for governmental purposes, so not any sort of, not development in the traditional sense of a development project. It's for governmental purposes, town-owned property.
Thank you. Hearing none, hearing's closed. All right, it's 8:40. You want to take 5, or do we want to rock and roll here?
Let's go.
All right. Let's give us a moment to reorganize here, and we'll rock and roll.
Swear to God, I wasn't even
Yeah,
thinking.
okay, yeah.
Who knows what maniacs will later appear in time for?
You know, thank you for the confidence, all right? I'll consider that support, okay? I'll say that. Well, come right out and said.
Practically an endorsement, you're welcome.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. And it's been recorded.
Put it in a piecemeal.
And you put it in there. My mailer will say that, endorsed by, okay? We'll see, I'll think you.
Are you going to contribute to this campaign? Are you going to give any money?
Might as well.
maybe.
I can
Yeah,
see it
guilt.
now, in kind, pizza.
In kind?
I'll put it right on the filing, you know, what the heck? Better still, I'll buy the pizza from there. There you go. Yeah.
Not the Amherst one, it doesn't taste as good. Different ones.
I don't know where are you?
In, Elmwood and Bird. City of
Oh,
Buffalo.
okay.
Yeah, the one in Amherst it's a franchise. It's not.
I know exactly one, the one on the,
One on the Elmwood.
on the east side of the street in the corner. Yeah, been there forever.
Yes. No, I don't know. I know how to work the machines barely.
So, just for,
Actually, at the Italian festival at Amherst, I can't stand, so.
man, stand this. But I don't know.
I'm basically a pizza maker.
I don't know how you find time. I've just seen you on TV. I've seen you in mailers. I've seen you all kinds. I can spell your name like no time.
I feel like you got a letter from me recently too.
I got a couple of them. Okay. And you know what I do with all my mail? I had to chuckle over myself.
What the hell are we doing in between the two of them?
Oh, it's a long story. It's a long story.
Yeah, keeping the peace is what it is.
Yeah, right. Staying out of trouble.
It's a long story, okay? You know, this is Trooper Week out there, you know. You know that for a fact? It's the truth.
It's Trooper Week?
It's like that. Oh, yeah, they're all over the place this week. Seriously.
Oh, seriously?
Oh, yeah. That vanity plank's pretty easy to remember.
I know, it's funny, I got those tickets in the mail.
Actually, you're not. You were using that for that? That used to be at one time, that was the case. When you no, I'm totally serious. Most of the time when you
If you
vanity,
racked up too many points,
they would pull that, yeah. They would pull
Really?
that. I kid you not.
They should actually keep that. It would be more of an incentive for safe driving. In my opinion.
Well,
What, are you saying
the state likes that extra money for those plates.
Yeah.
Because, it really costs them once to do that, and then most people like to keep vanity plates forever.
Yeah.
That's true.
I mean, and I can say, because I was right behind you tonight, pulling into that driveway. And,
I thought I was going rather slow.
well, how about those ladies, they want to take on that media? You know what I did? Because you were in front of me, and I kind of, you know what I did? I kind of scared the lady. I went right over there. And I went, she goes,
Lay on my porch, like.
no, I didn't. And then I kind of whizzed. I knew what I was going to do, but I purposely did that, and her eyes lit up. Like, oh my God, I'm going to have a head on here.
In your new
Let's
car.
not
Yeah,
run.
I wasn't.
Trying to get some plan.
You wasn't going to do that.
Planning board's reputation will never.
So just remember, it is now on record. I'm gonna have fun with that. All right. Folks, we ready to rock a little bit? We're good?
Yeah.
All right. All right, folks, we will, oh, I'm sorry.
Don't trip.
Don't run, don't run. We don't want anybody to fall. All right. We'll go back to item number 1. This is the Phillips Brothers Supply Site Plan Review, proposed for the Phillips Brothers / Shatkin School of Dentistry. We're going for seeker, determination, and site plan. We'll start off with seeker. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Michael. Do we have a second? By Joseph. Discussion? No discussion? Roll call, please.
Shamil?
Yes.
Gill?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Giuliani?
Yes.
Con.
Yes.
Murphy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes. The motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Second part of that site plan review, it's actionable with conditions. Do we wish to repeat the conditions?
Yes, please.
There were also 2 additional conditions suggested during discussion. I'll include
so
those.
just so everyone's
I will go through all of them.
goes through them and understands them. Thank you, Mr. Palumbo.
So you have a draft of the conditions for your consideration. Number 1 is conditions be met, as stated in the Traffic Safety Board approval. Number 2 is the conditions be met, as stated in the Erie County DPW letter.
Gary? So it gets, okay, thanks.
Number 3 is that the conditions of the alternative parking plan be met, as stated in the zoning enforcement officer's letter. Number 4, I'm sorry, 2 were removed because the town board did act. So the following would be that all of Number 4 is that all of the mechanical equipment and utility structures, this is the standard condition that we normally have, that they all be screened in accordance with code. Number 5 is that also a standard condition that as-built record drawings be provided. Number 6 would be that the requirements and conditions be met as stated in the planning department letter dated March 27th. That also includes I want to be sure that we say that includes a new lighting plan. And then the 2 new conditions for your consideration that came up during the public hearing. You may want to consider specifically requiring signage indicating that it's public parking, and the shuttle service from Damon be provided in perpetuity for the proposed use.
Thank you. So there was a motion, there was a second. We've read conditions, and of course, 2 others were added to this. Based on what you've heard, does everyone understand the conditions? Are they okay with the conditions based on the motion and the second?
If I may, Chairman.
Oh, you go ahead. You're to the left.
You're first.
Okay. Well, as far as the shuttle, can we add a word that says adequate shuttle service?
And only to piggyback off that, I was thinking with regards to the adequate busing and/or limiting student parking, so that there was more of a requirement to utilize that busing service they propose the Damon students were going to be utilizing.
Fine either way.
Okay, so are we okay with those amended conditions? Everybody?
Adequate. Adequate's difficult to enforce.
Define?
Define and therefore enforce.
Well, my concern with it just saying shuttle service is that 20 years from now, they could have a single shuttle that rolls by every 3 days and get by the exact wording that's there. Adequate shuttle service, I don't want to limit it to a specific number of buses or anything like that. I don't think that's workable. But at least something that says that you have an adequate service, at least that's something, at least something to hang your hat on.
With shuttle service for all days, classes are in session, or something like that.
Yeah. if wanna
You
take it
may
further.
also want to consider that if parking proves to be inadequate, that they develop a parking permit system. Therefore, they could not grant a permit to a student, only to a staff member or someone else.
That would go against,
And I thought
that would go against the public
covered
parking.
under limiting the student parking, so an and/or so that all concerns could be addressed.
And we do want to point out that one of the conditions of the alternative parking plan is that after a year of operation, we're going to revisit the adequacy of the plan.
Sure.
All right. Are you good now with what you've got?
If there was a parking permit system, how would it be open to public parking per the requested condition?
Good question.
Well, I think you could only mandate with regards to the property and not the right-of-way. The town still is maintaining the right-of-way, which is public parking. So these conditions only relate to the parcel in question, is my understanding, but certainly.
That is correct. The right-of-way remains in the town's possession, so it must be public parking. I think the adjacent owner's legal counsel simply wanted it to be signed so that everyone knows it is public parking.
Understood.
Okay.
That's fine.
There was
Are we
also.
good now?
Yes, we can write those up.
We're good? Everyone understands those conditions?
Understood.
All right, just want to make sure of that.
The property owner, Shatkin, was also open to a crosswalk being installed.
Yeah, good point.
So how do we add that?
Can we?
I don't, can we?
I think you have to word it in such a way, though, it has to qualify for that. You just can't openly put those anyplace.
That's what I thought. I
Yeah,
thought that's
you just can't put that anywhere. There's a lot of warrants to that.
If permissible.
Yeah.
If permissible, a crosswalk.
Because there's a lot of warrants that require that. You
Yeah.
just can't openly do
Yeah,
those.
let's say that as a condition, then, if it meets all other legal requirements.
All right. Are you good now? We're good with everything?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we have a, yes, Ann. What's the total number?
I think that's just for.
Nine. All right, 9 conditions. We've revised some, we've added 2. Everyone's good with these. I'm gonna ask one more time. All right. So we have a motion, we have a second. Everyone agrees on the conditions. Roll call, please.
Sorry, but I didn't get a motion in a second.
Yeah, there wasn't a motion.
There-
Well, I'll move to approve with the conditions we just discussed, the 9 conditions.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second now. Roll call, please.
Jamil?
Yes.
Gil?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Giuliani?
Yes.
Khan?
Yes.
Penberthy?
Yes.
Raphael?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. Thank you. All right, let's go to the next item. Item number 2, which is the site plan review, proposed office/warehouse building addition, property located at 80 Creekside Drive. This again is for first, we're gonna do for seeker determination, second will be for site plan. Seeker determination first. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
By Mr. Giuliani, do we have a second? Second. By Harb. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Jamil?
Yes.
Gil?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Giuliani?
Yes.
Khan?
Yes.
Penberthy? Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. That's the secret determination. The next thing we have is for site plan review. There are conditions with that. Okay, so why don't we read the conditions first, please, Mr. Palumbo, or whomever is going to do that. Tom, thank you.
That the petitioner provide a geotechnical report for review by the building department prior to the issuance of any building permits. That the petitioner provide a revised engineering report to the satisfaction of the engineering department. That the petitioner satisfy the requirements of the Fire Chiefs Association in their last dated review letter. And then also that the petitioner satisfy the remaining requirements of the zoning enforcement officer, planning department, building department, to the satisfaction of those departments, that signs be excluded from this site plan review, that any dumpsters, mechanicals, or other accessory structures be adequately screened, and that as-built record drawings be provided. I'm sorry, and also the added condition that at a time when the parcel to the east is to be developed, that the petitioner install sidewalks along the Creekside Drive frontage,
If required.
if required.
Thank you. All right, so we've read the conditions. Does everyone understand the conditions? Yes. Seeing bobbling heads. All right, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, Mike and Brittany. We have a motion, we have a second. We've read the conditions. Everyone understands the conditions. Roll call, please.
Jamil?
Yes.
Gil?
Yes.
Gilmore?
Yes.
Giuliani?
Yes.
Khan?
Yes.
Penberthy?
Yes. Raphael?
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Next item, item number 3. This is a request to rezone .17 acres of land from OB to MFR 5. The property is located at 2350 Sweet Home Road. This is for a referral for rezoning. Do I have a motion? Excuse me, let me back up. I know there's some conditions with this. Do we want to review those conditions one more time?
Well, technically, you should have a motion and a second before we have discussion.
Technically, I'm asking you to review the conditions first.
If you were to approve the rezoning?
If you were to review, just so everyone understands the conditions.
That the 5.2 acres of permanent open space is depicted on the site plan prepared by Camino Wood Morris DPC dated December 16th to 2022 shall not be developed for any buildings or other above-ground structures and shall remain permanently undeveloped. Number 2 is that the residential development of the project shall not consist of an apartment complex comprised of rental units, but instead shall consist of residential units for sale. That the maximum allowable density would be 48 units. That the residential buildings to be constructed on the project site shall be limited to single-story residential units with second-story loft space. Second-story windows are not permitted on the rear of second-story loft space in buildings number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 14 as depicted on the Carmina Wood plan. That exclusive of sunrooms or enclosed porches, the maximum allowed height of any building on the project site shall be 30 feet. The maximum height of any sunroom or enclosed porch shall not exceed 17 feet. That there shall be a maximum of 4 attached residential units in any residential structure. And number 7 is a long one. That the proportion of the residential buildings that include the second-story loft space shall have a minimum setback of 35 feet from the southern boundary and the western boundary of the project site. Notwithstanding the minimum setback language in the preceding sentence, a first-floor only sunroom or enclosed porch shall be permitted on the rear side of the residential buildings along the southern side of the project site, so long as the minimum setback the first floor sunroom or enclosed porch is 23 feet from the southern boundary, and a first floor only sunroom shall be permitted on the rear side of the residential buildings along the western project site, so long as the minimum setback of the first floor sunroom is 26.97 feet to the western boundary of the project site. Additionally, patios on the rear of the residential buildings on the southern side of the property shall have a minimum setback of 23 feet from the southern boundary. And 26.97 feet from the western boundary. Condition 8, the minimum setback of building number 6 is depicted on the site plan prepared by Carmina Wood, December 16, 22, from the northern boundary of 574 North Ellicott Creek shall be 95 feet. Number 9, the minimum setback of building number 7, as depicted on the plan, it's now on the screen, shall, from the southern boundary of the project, shall be 137 feet. Number 11, the landscaping as required by the high impact screening standard is defined in Town of Amherst Code, Section 20372-4B, shall be provided along the southern side of the portion and a portion of the western side of 2350, which was formerly 2360 Sweet Home Road, shall be installed as per the approved landscape plan issued and approved on July 16, 2019. Number 12, that a lighting plan for the site plan demonstrate there will be not any light spillover onto contiguous properties, specifically 550, 566, 574, 598, and 620 North Ellicott Creek Road. Number 13, there should not be an internal driveway located along the Sweet Home Road frontage of the parcel at 2350 Sweet Home Road that connects to the northern side of the parcel, formerly consisting of 2360 Sweet Home Road. Number 14, except for a driveway that only serves a 2-unit building located along North Elkett Creek Road, as depicted on the plan, and the gated emergency access, only driveway the connection to North Elkett, there shall not be any driveway or roadway connection from the project site on the North Elkett Creek Road. Number 15, the gated emergency access connection to North Elkett Creek Road will only be accessible by emergency personnel. Number 16, that the gated emergency access driveway to North Elkett Creek Road be paved with a hard surface and not constructed of grass pavers.
Thank you, Scott.
And these would be the same conditions for item number
We understand.
4.
We won't have you go through that other time.
I missed it.
We wanna go
Can
home.
we repeat that, please?
Exactly. All
I
right.
wasn't paying attention.
So, a lot of conditions. I know you have them in front of you. We wanted to get it on record. Okay, so we've got a list of it. We've heard them. We've heard the hearing tonight. Do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have a second? One more time. Do we have a second? I'll approve it for that so we can move this along. We have a motion. Adele, I'll second that. Roll call, please.
Shamil,
No.
Gill,
No.
Gilmore.
Yes.
Giuliani.
Yes.
Khan,
Yes.
Penberthy. No. Raphael.
No.
Motion fails 4-3. Okay. Item number 4.
I supposed to just fail, it's not a decision or a recommendation.
Pardon me?
Motion failed, so that's not a denial.
I understand that. The motion failed. You said that.
Right.
Right.
So I'll move to deny.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Brittany, second by Michael to deny
What are we denying?
Deny the rezone.
the rezone.
Oh, okay.
We're recommending to the town board that
All
we
right,
deny the
yep,
rezone.
yep.
All right. Roll call, please.
Shamil,
Yes.
Gill,
Yes.
Gilmore.
No.
Giuliani.
No.
Khan,
No.
Penberthy.
Yes.
Raphael.
Yes.
All right, that motion passes 4-3. Denial. We are, in other words, the planning board is not in favor of this rezoning.
That's correct.
Thank you. Item number 4, same conditions. We all understand that, right?
If you want to go forward.
Well, why don't we just, I'll move to deny item number 4 as well on the same grounds.
I will second.
Okay, motion and a second to deny. Michael and Brittany. Roll call, please.
Shamil,
Yes.
Gill,
Yes.
Gilmore.
No.
Giuliani.
No.
Khan,
No.
Penberthy.
Yes.
Raphael.
Yes.
Okay, then that motion passes 4-3. All right, item number 5. This is the proposed rezoning. Rezone, once again, referral to the town board of 0.57 acres of land from R4 to CTR 5, located at 3945 Wrench Road. Once again, there are some conditions with this. Please tell me, I can't remember how many hours. it is.
One condition.
Wonderful.
I will read that
Hey, who's
condition.
gonna read that?
That the comments and supporting documentation requested by the Engineering Department and Traffic Safety Board be addressed to their satisfaction during the site plan review process.
Thank you.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Roll call, please.
Shamil,
Yes.
Gill,
Yes.
Gilmore.
Yes.
Giuliani.
Yes.
Khan,
Yes.
Penberthy.
Yes.
Raphael.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. All right, item number 6. This again, this is for the proposed zoning code text amendment, local law to amend chapter 203 of the town code. There are no conditions on this. Okay, do I have a motion?
Suggest a language change?
Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, do we have a second? We have a motion to approve, do we have a second? All right, for the sake of this, so I'm not leaving you hanging out there, I will,
Can I suggest we discuss possible language change on this? Under,
we're in the midst of a motion, but if you're suggesting for a moment that we hold up on that,
I
I'll allow
would,
that.
yeah, I'd ask that. Under Part D, where it's, application for such use impacting 20 acres or more may be referred, change the word may to shall. We would also suggest changing 20 acres to 10 acres. 2 changes.
Wow. Let's open it up for discussion.
I just feel this still satisfies, obviously, some concerns the public may have about checks and balances. Still, obviously recognizing that certain projects of the town need to move in an expeditious manner, but thinking that, you know, those projects less than 10 acres can proceed as the town so wishes, but those in excess of 10 acres would still need to go before planning board. Planning board would only be a recommending body, but still that it would come before the planning board for us to make the recommendation to town board, because we can't guarantee who will be on the town board in the future.
Okay.
But even with that, there's no monetary limit. So that what makes me much more nervous than the area.
No, even if it's referred to for comment, it still would be exempt from the requirements of public hearings, et cetera.
What if it's adjacent to some public facilities? Some public-owned facilities?
That's
So
what
what-
you're trying to get at.
So Scott, I just want to make sure I understand that even if it's changed to 10 acres and a mandatory referral to the planning board
For a recommendation.
for recommendation, there's nothing in it that requires
The
public hearing?
proposed law would exempt the town from the zoning ordinance in its entirety for the most part, on a town-owned property, town projects, et cetera, which includes parks, you name it, but it includes, the parts that, Part 8, which is the site plan review process, and the process for public notice, the process for public hearings. So that's where you're heading with the checks and balances, I believe, but.
Well, then I'm withdrawing my suggestions, and I will let the town, or let the planning board proceed how they will, but I am not in favor of this proposed
Okay, so you're withdrawing your
suggestions.
suggestions.
Correct.
Okay, so we have a motion, so,
I think you seconded it.
I did second it. Okay, and we're having this discussion now. All right, so you've withdrawn yours. Michael, where are you with yours?
I would say let a vote go as it is then. I mean, just so, again, for my edification here, we already know that the town is exempt from zoning regulations on its own land, correct?
No.
They're not.
We're not.
Okay. So basically, this takes it out of, get it to the public, our call over it. Does it go before the board or no? Town board. Yeah, let me be more precise. Town board.
It's up to the town board to make its own rules, as well as notification.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Should we adjourn this particular items until we have clarification?
Well, I think what you have
I'm
to do is,
satisfied.
I think because you have a motion on the floor, okay, for approval of this, you're going to have to withdraw that motion.
All right.
Is that what you're telling me you're doing?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay, so now we're withdrawing the motion.
Then I'll move to
Until this
deny.
motion is dealt with.
Pardon me?
Until this motion is dealt with.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you suggesting at this point then? No. So we no longer have a motion on the floor. So do I have a motion now?
I'll move to deny.
Second?
Okay, I was kind of thinking we were going to motion to maybe dig into this and get a better understanding of it.
Right, I don't know about denying it. At this point, there's a purpose behind this. Let them go fix it, okay? Let's adjourn it until it's fixed, and then vote on it.
That's all, yeah, they have open.
Your recommendation.
Yeah.
But I'm saying if we want to, to me, it's my it appears that we need to get some clarification on
But
something.
the reality is the town board's gonna do what the town board wants to do. We're just an advisory board with regards to this.
Yeah.
So, my position is, let us vote on it tonight. They can hear planning board's voice, whatever it may be, whatever the vote may be, because ultimately, it truly doesn't matter. We're just an advisory board with regards to this.
I agree, and there's no need to kick the can down the road and add another month or two to the proceedings and before they can do whatever they want.
I think it shows goodwill on our part that we're not kicking the can down the road, because what they're trying to do is move things down the road quicker. So let's get this moved through quick, and that we're gonna vote as we will and not push it down. That carries more weight.
Okay, so our discussion at this point, you've withdrawn your, okay, now you've made a recommendation, or a motion to deny,
Correct.
And I second it.
and we have a second by Joe. Roll call, please.
Jamil,
Yes.
Gil,
Yes.
Gilmore.
No.
Giuliani,
No.
Khan,
No.
Penberthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes.
Motion passes to deny 4-3. Thank you. All right. We have one more here. We do. Snuck in there. It's in the back. I missed it too today earlier. All right. This is for to request a 2-year extension of site plan approval for a proposed cultural center. Wow. Property located at 6569 Main Street. This is both for site plan extension, and site plan extension, number 1 and number 2. Okay? I'm gonna ask for a motion to adjourn this. There's a lot of things that are not, they're still up in the air on this thing.
I don't even have it.
Okay, my suggestion is, I'd like to ask for a motion to adjourn until all of these issues are resolved. There's a number of issues that need to be resolved in this yet.
No, the big issue is they need to reobtain the variances to make this an approvable site plan.
Yeah, so,
Do they need the extension to do these various things? Then we can.
No.
Then we could adjourn without any penalty.
No, because we could, actually, they could ask for a third extension if they want to, but the problem is the variances previously granted have a lifespan. Unless they actually implement the plan, they expire in 2 years.
so that's what we're doing.
So they have to renew those prior to,
That's what I'm right, until such time as this stuff gets resolved. Okay, that's the best way to go.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so do I have a motion? To adjourn until such time as all items are resolved.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mike, second by Brittany. Now, I gotta do this twice now, right? Because there's 2 issues on here? Or if I ask to adjourn this once, is this, close this thing out?
once will be fine, because you can't even make the first
We have
determination.
a motion, we have a second, roll call, please.
Jamil,
Yes.
Gil,
Yes.
Gilmore.
Yes.
Giuliani.
Yes.
Khan.
Yes.
Penberthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes.
The motion passes 7-0. All right,
Minutes. Minutes.
now, is what I'm going to next.
I'm a dead man.
Hours, days.
No, minutes. Months. Leap years.
Gotta give them, okay. All right, minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity? Don't, are you taking those home again? Every week you do that. The poor lady buys this out of her
They give it
pocket.
back.
Okay, and you're taking it home to your kids.
No.
All right.
Enough candy.
All right,
Easter was just 2 weeks
all
ago.
right, all right. We have some minutes out there, folks. Has everyone had a chance to take a look at the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, do we have a motion to approve the minutes as submitted?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, I think by Michael and by Brittany. All right, roll call, please.
Jamil.
Yes.
Gil.
Yes.
Gilmore.
Yes.
Giuliani.
Yes.
Khan.
Yes.
Penberthy. Yes. Raphael.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to approve the minutes as submitted. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I will move.
Just a little too anxious to do that. We have a motion and we have a second to adjourn.
Thank you, Chairman.
These days I'm gonna vote against. breaking the meeting. In fact, I'd like to see like enough of us, like, what happens if 4 people voted against it? Just gotta stay here overnight? What happens next?
We have that somewhere, we just keep going in circles.
Yeah.
It's no fun.
In the office tomorrow, I was like, where the hell are you? I'm still planning board. So won't let me in. I can't get 2 more votes.